Yo guys, it's RyugaXD. You already know YouTube has its limit size, so if you want to see the spicier, uncensored, and exclusive stuff I can't post here, check out my Patreon. That's where I drop all my 18+ lemon content, early uploads, and more. Links in the description. Come join the fun. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and Kushina Uzumaki were the parents of Menma, Mito, and Naruto, who were born as triplets. They were born heroes because the beast was split during the Nine Tails attack on the village, with half of it sealed in Menma and the other half in Mito. But Naruto didn't get anything. While Mito received recognition for her developing talent and Menma grew up as an ordinary child, Naruto was something much more, a prodigy of prodigies, who had mastered abilities that no child his age should have had. However, his parents never recognized him for his genius. Menma and Mito were the objects of their pride, love, and care. Naruto was cast into the background, ignored by his family, derided by the community, and made to follow a lonely path that no one ever saw. The triplets, Naruto, Menma, and Mito, were already 5 years old and had started their shinobi training. Minato called Naruto aside one morning in a firm voice. He commanded, "Teach Menma, help him catch up." As usual, Naruto complied without protest. All right. Menma became irritated while they were training. He was unable to match Naruto's innate skill despite employing the same strategies. Menma snarled, "You're hiding something, give me the secret scrolls you're using." Incredulous, Naruto blinked. "I don't have any secret scrolls. I just train with the same ones everyone else uses." Menma squinted her eyes. "Liar, I've seen you train alone, you have something hidden. Give it to me." Naruto gave a composed yet firm shake of his head. "I really don't. If I had something special, I'd give it to you. I promise." Menma became resentful after becoming frustrated. He had an idea, a small-minded, evil scheme. "Fine," Menma whispered to himself. "Let's see what happens now." He suddenly clenched his fist and gave himself a hard punch to the face, causing a minor bruise. He started to scream a moment later. "Dad!" Minato suddenly materialized, startled. "Menma, what happened?" With tears running down his cheek, Menma gripped his bruised cheek. "It was Naruto. He hit me." Naruto's eyes grew wide with shock. "What? No, I didn't, I swear." However, Minato slapped him across the face before he could finish. "Enough with the lies," Minato yelled, giving him a fierce look. Too stunned to speak, Naruto stood motionless. The pain in his heart was far worse than the sting on his cheek. Menma grinned behind Minato's back. And ever since, he repeatedly employed the same tactic, injuring himself, yelling, and placing the blame on Naruto. Naruto was punished each time. And every time, Menma's word was taken without question. It was never really home for Naruto. By the time the triplets turned 7, there was no denying the disparity in their treatment. Every day, Kushina, their mother, would gleefully ask Menma and Mito, "What do you two want for dinner?" "Ramen, curry, I'll make whatever you like." But she didn't ask Naruto at all. Not once. No one would notice if he sat at the table. Nobody paid attention when he spoke. Nobody cared if he was hurt. Naruto no longer even belonged to the family in their eyes. He was a shadow, a specter. They were even worse than the village. False rumors that Naruto was the real demon, that his chakra was corrupted, and that he was dangerous had begun to circulate. For reasons they themselves couldn't explain, the public detested him. A group of villagers cornered Naruto in an alley as he was making his way home alone one rainy evening. With hate in their eyes and ruthless smiles, they surrounded him. One spit out, "He's not human," another asked, "Why would the Hokage even keep a thing like you?" They dragged his body through the mud, kicked him, beat him, and cursed him. Then, beside him, a man squatting with something in his hand, wearing dark robes and smelling strongly of alcohol. It was a human finger that had rotted. He sneered, "You're a demon, right?" As Naruto choked and gagged, he thrust the finger into his mouth and forced it down, saying, "Demons feed on humans, so go ahead. Eat it, show us what you really are." Naruto's face was smeared with tears and blood. His heart thumped with pain, bewilderment, and anger as his body shook. Nobody arrived to assist. No parents, no rain, and no noise. The villagers didn't realize that the finger they pushed into Naruto's mouth wasn't just any human remains. It was something much more dreadful than decaying flesh from the dead. It was a cursed relic that had survived time itself, a piece of the indestructible. Ryomen Sukuna, the king of curses, had it on his finger. Once, everyone feared this creature. A creature whose name brought sorcerers to their knees and broke nations. Sukuna was a monster to the weak. He was a god to the strong. During his time on Earth, Sukuna slaughtered entire armies and played with death like a game. His intelligence was inhuman, and his command of cursed energy was unmatched. Born of chaos, cruelty, and total dominance, he was a true prodigy. And now, inside a broken boy, that power slept. A prodigy of prodigies, pushed to the brink of despair, despised by the village, and abandoned by family. Something changed inside Naruto as he lay in the mud, coughing, bleeding, and shaking from the agony. Sukuna's finger's cursed energy identified him as a fellow human being rather than a host to be devoured. Another prodigy, like him. Sukuna then awoke from the darkest abyss of cursed power. The deep, icy, amused voice reverberated in Naruto's mind. So, this is the body I've been fed into. How ironic. Naruto's eyes grew wide, and his heart raced, but not out of fear, but rather from something else, something sinister, something old, something strong. The king of curses met the child who had been forgotten by both men and gods at that precise moment. And that was just the start. Sukuna was no longer the godlike creature he had been when he woke up. For now he was silent, for his cursed energy was spent, a sliver of who he really was. He listened, watched, and studied the boy who unwittingly became his vessel. Sukuna sensed it as soon as he stirred inside Naruto. A spark, no, a flame, unbridled, uncontrolled power. Not only was the boy talented, but he was a prodigy, the kind that only comes around once every 1,000 years. What was it that Sukuna saw? A child who endured pain in silence, a child who smiled through it, a child who trained alone in the dark, a child who was slapped by his own father, a child who was beaten by villagers, and a child who was ignored by a mother who never once asked him what he liked to eat. It was 3 years later. Sukuna remained silent. However, he witnessed everything. He observed how Minato, who was once thought of as a genius himself, accepted all of Menma's lies without ever questioning why the bruises only ever showed up when Naruto was present. He saw day after day as Naruto was silenced, humiliated, and slapped. There was Menma after that. Sukuna measured him, observed him, and examined him. What did he discover? Trash. Sukuna never detested the untalented because he witnessed those without talent confronting him head-to-head in his day, not because Menma lacked talent. He detested people who, when endowed with resources, refused to become strong. Sukuna might have respected and even tolerated Menma if he had trained and fought his way up from weakness. Instead, he saw a slack brat who was drunk on unmerited affection and spoiled by praise. Empty, arrogant, and pampered. And yet, they give him everything. Sukuna thought, he has nothing. Even a demon would have been sickened by it. However, Naruto possessed all of Sukuna's traits, including brilliance, loneliness, and rage. The king of curses was now inside a boy who would one day bring the world to its knees. Not by accident, not through privilege, but through authority. At first, Sukuna was unable to comprehend this. Naruto was a person. He was treated like dirt despite the fact that he was just a boy and not a reincarnated monster or a cursed spirit. Sukuna, who had lived for more than a millennium, witnessed gods and demons, kings and beggars, was an expert at interpreting people's emotions, lies, and true intentions. He had witnessed hatred manifested as fear, envy, and disgust. However, Naruto's experience was different. His parents never used the words to express their hatred out loud. Sukuna, however, saw it in every look, decision, and quiet. The great fourth Hokage Minato saw a legacy, a boy to be proud of, and a symbol in Menma, who held half of the 9 tails. What about when he turned to face Naruto? Nothing. No pride, no concern, just the weight of a child he didn't understand, and maybe harbored resentment. Then came Kushina, the mother, who didn't scream or beat him. Even worse, though, was turning away as if nothing had occurred. She inquired about Menma and Mito's training progress, lunch preferences, and attire day after day. She never once asked Naruto, though, as though he didn't exist, as though he wasn't even there, and Sukuna observed all of this. Mito, his sister, was the only person who did not treat Naruto like a ghost. She didn't lie about him, she didn't hate him, and she even greeted him when they happened to walk past each other in the hallways. However, it wasn't affection or the warmth of a sibling. It was the same kind of detached care that a good orphanage matron would give a child in her care, kindness without connection, compassion without intimacy. And that hurt Naruto more than hate ever could, in a way. It was not the hatred that perplexed Sukuna, the king of curses. Not because of the unfairness, but by the irrationality of it all. Naruto was a typical child born with 2 siblings, he had no secret monster or curse. Despite this, he was treated as though his birth was unnecessary. Stupid people, Sukuna thought sourly, they've decided to make fun of the storm before it's even started to thunder. The entire village greeted Menma and Mito as heroes when they joined the Ninja Academy, hailed as the village's protectors and praised for keeping the Nine Tails at bay. They were met with smiles, bows, and gifts and praise wherever they went. On the other hand, Naruto was viewed as an outsider, whereas his siblings were admired, he was despised and sneered at as though he were a danger instead of a youngster. Menma gained popularity at the academy very quickly, especially among the girls, and was surrounded by adoring fangirls all the time. He soaked up the attention and indulged in their praise like a kid in a candy store. Naruto was a prodigy at the academy, with consistently high scores and abilities that outstripped those of most of his peers. However, for some reason, his grades never reflected his actual potential. Each report card showed Naruto barely passing, despite his evident skill and dedication. He asked his teachers why his grades were so low, feeling confused and frustrated, but they were unable to provide an explanation, and their discomfort only confirmed his suspicions. It wasn't until he learned the truth that everything made sense. Naruto was shocked to learn that his father had switched Menma's grades with his own, and that Menma, who had barely passed, now had the marks of someone who had excelled. For years, Naruto had assumed that his parents had favored his siblings because of the 9 tails that were ingrained in them, and that perhaps Menma needed more help because he was not talented, and that Mito's talent only made sense to them. He had accepted that, certain that it was the reason they didn't recognize his accomplishments, and he had believed that if he worked hard enough, he, too, could win their love. However, everything changed after the grade swap was discovered. For the first time, Naruto realized the heartbreaking reality. His parents had never really loved him, they had just chosen to ignore him rather than favor Menma and Mito out of need or affection. For the first time, Naruto understood that he could no longer hold out hope for something that had never existed, the recognition he so desperately sought and the love he had hoped for would never materialize. It was time to let go of the fantasy. When Naruto learned that his father had switched his grades with Menma's, he became so enraged that he decided to intentionally fail, figuring that if his father didn't think highly of his actual skills, he wouldn't bother to demonstrate them anymore. He passed by the narrowest of margins, barely making it through. Minato was so upset that his son had fallen short of expectations that he slapped him when he saw his grades, but Naruto felt nothing but resentment and no shame or regret. Despite his publicity and the continued acclaim, Menma failed a number of subjects, but it made no difference because he was never reprimanded or punished for his failures. As usual, Naruto's mother said nothing to defend him or to point out the unfairness of it all. Her lack of concern was more painful than any slap. In that silence, Naruto's anger grew, a raging fury that threatened to overwhelm him. He couldn't comprehend why his family treated him in this manner, and he started to realize that they never really cared. Sukuna watched from inside as Naruto's heart grew enraged, frustrated, and hateful. Sukuna had been quietly accumulating cursed energy from Naruto's suffering for the last 3 years. The negativity, resentment, and hatred that had grown inside the boy were just what Sukuna needed. And now Sukuna felt the surge of power, the newborn resentment rising in Naruto's heart, the energy growing tangible, swirling around Naruto like a storm about to burst. The prodigy he had been waiting for was ready, and Sukuna saw his chance. The praise for Menma at the academy increased daily, but Sasuke Uchiha was the one who saw through the facade, while Naruto was left to endure the unfair treatment in silence while Menma reveled in the admiration of his peers for his high grades. As a keen observer, Sasuke saw something that others missed. He saw Naruto's true potential, the raw talent that he possessed, and he even started to think that Naruto was more of a prodigy than his older brother, Itachi. However, despite Naruto's obvious skill, his grades remained low, and Sasuke was baffled as to why. Sasuke was watching Naruto one day when he noticed that the boy was angry and hateful, and that the anger was aimed directly at Menma. Naruto's eyes were full of rage, and Sasuke could see the intense frustration that was simmering beneath the surface. It was a strange feeling to see someone so talented, yet so angry, and to know that his pride kept him from comprehending Naruto's suffering. Sasuke hesitated, not sure if he should step in, his Uchiha pride keeping him from reaching out. As the days went by, Naruto continued to hardly move, on purpose. He refused to give in to pressure from Minato, his former father, or anyone else who tried to exert pressure on him to do more. Naruto had decided that if his family didn't care, then he wouldn't either. After another long day at the academy, Naruto was sleeping soundly, breathing steadily, and his body finally resting when the peaceful darkness of his sleep abruptly changed, twisted, until he found himself standing in a strange place that was dark, quiet, and brimming with a sense of power that was overwhelming. Through the silence came a voice. The deep, ancient-sounding voice said, "Well, I finally get to meet the prodigy of prodigies," with a hint of amusement. With keen eyes, Naruto whirled around and said, "Who are you?" he asked, instantly alert and assuming a combat stance. "Don't worry, brat," said the man in front of him, his eyes shining like rubies soaked in blood as he laughed. "I'm not here to engage in combat. Not just yet. I came to speak." "Then speak," Naruto said, squinting his eyes. "Games are not something I have time for." The stranger smiled and said, "Are you not a fiery one?" "That's nice. Excellently. I've witnessed the way you've been handled. The way your alleged father changed your grades. You were hated and beaten by the villagers for no reason. I've been observing for years. So what do you want from me?" Naruto tensed. He asked directly. Still grinning, the man cocked his head and said, "Let's just say you and I are the same." "What do you mean?" Naruto scowled. "I was once the strongest of my era," the man said, his voice growing darker and heavier. "A genius among geniuses. No one could compete with me for centuries. I was feared as a monster by the weak. I was considered a god by the strong. Nevertheless, in spite of everything, I was despised. I was afraid. I was even abandoned by my parents, due to the fact that I was born of a cursed spirit." He moved in closer, his aura engulfing Naruto like a tempest. "And you," he added in a reserved but steely voice, "a human boy, born innocent, gifted, and unrivaled, but despised, rejected, and ignored by your own family. Particularly that father you have. Favoritism has blinded this idiot." Clutching his fists, Naruto remained silent. Someone didn't lie to him for once. Someone got it. Naruto remained steadfast, his gaze fixed on the man in front of him, an eerie and ancient figure. Naruto asked in a steady but low voice, "What do you want?" Sukuna grinned, the smile that contained centuries of pride, suffering, and blood. "Let's join hands, Naruto. Together, we'll reshape this world." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "Reshape it how?" Sukuna said. "We conquer it, without hesitation. We crush those who dared look down on us. We make them crawl. The weak will serve, and the strong will reign. No more lies. No more masks." Naruto's face became more icy. "I'm not interested." Sukuna's eyes grew a little darker. "Why not? Look around you. The village treats you like a disease. Your own father erased your achievements. Your mother pretends you don't exist. And your siblings," he laughed, "they bask in the light you were denied." While clenching his fists, Naruto maintained eye contact. "I know all that." "Then take my power," pleaded Sukuna. "Become the strongest. Make them pay." Naruto gave a headshake. "I don't want to rule over anyone. And I don't want to become like them, or like you." That caused Sukuna to hesitate. "Even with all that power," Naruto went on, "you were still alone, weren't you? All that strength, and no one to share it with. That's not power. That's a cage." For the first time in centuries, Sukuna's grin dimmed. He whispered, "You're more interesting than I thought." Naruto's expression was unreadable as he met Sukuna's gaze. "I'd rather be content with even one person who loves me for who I am rather than for my power and live alone all the days of my life," he stated quietly. "You say you're the strongest, but even with all that power, you were still lonely. Weren't you?" Sukuna took a while to reply. Then he laughed dryly and without humor. "You're right. I once met a boy, normal, untalented, nothing special. But he worked harder than anyone. And one day, he defeated me. Not with strength, but with heart. He showed me what it means to be human. What it means to love." For a brief moment, Naruto's eyes widened, but he immediately covered his surprise. Sukuna took a step forward, his tone icy. "If you had agreed to my offer when I first woke up, I would have killed you without hesitation." Naruto broke the heaviness of the ensuing silence. "Then why ask me now?" "Because you're like me, but not entirely." Sukuna's eyes flitted. With a steady tone, Naruto sighed. "The village. Yeah, They've treated me like dirt. My parents, they chose to ignore me. But there are a few people, just a few, who've treated me like a real person. And besides, he turned around. Konoha isn't the whole world. I believe there are places out there where people aren't like this. Where they won't hate me just for existing. Sukuna's eyebrow went up. You're still holding on to hope. Naruto stated, not hope. Curiosity. Before I destroy anything, I want to see what else this world has to offer. Following a pause, Sukuna stated, I want to create a world where everyone is treated equally, fairly, in a steady but not icy tone. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That's not what you said before. You talked about conquest, enslaving the weak. Sukuna laughed dryly. Yes, that was my first instinct. It always has been. When you're hated your whole life, hunted, shunned, spat on, it's easy to see domination as the only way to be acknowledged. But, he hesitated. He briefly resembled a man who had seen too much, rather than the king of curses. The words, even when I was at the height of my power, I was alone, were spoken softly by Sukuna. No matter how many bowed before me, no one stood beside me. Naruto's fists clenched slightly, but he remained silent. Sukuna's eyes never left hers as she said, at the end, when I was dying, I realized something. Power means nothing if there's no one to share it with. In that last moment, I decided, if I ever got another chance, I'd try to understand. Not just strength, but love, connection, maybe, even redemption. Naruto gave him a startled look. Sukuna understood it, not because he acknowledged it, that isolation. That pain of being in the middle of a crowd but invisible. Sukuna inquired, you've felt it too, haven't you? Slowly, Naruto nodded. The village, my so-called family, the way they treat me, yeah, I've felt it. And yet, even when I gave you the ability to make the world bow down, Sukuna remarked, taking a step closer. Naruto gave a small smile, but it was one of silent defiance rather than joy. I'd rather live with a little dignity than rule in loneliness, he stated. You might be strong, Sukuna. Stronger than anyone, but in the end, you were alone. That's not strength, that's tragedy. Sukuna remained quiet for a while. Then, in a tone that was not malicious but rather sounded almost like. Maybe you're the one I've been waiting for, he whispered with respect. Naruto stood in the dark emptiness, still attempting to interpret Sukuna's offer. With caution, Naruto questioned, so, what now? Sukuna's arms were folded. We train. Naruto blinked. What? Repeating, you need to become strong, Sukuna said. Then we can formulate a plan. With furrowed brows, Naruto reminded him, but you said you'd give me power. I did, Sukuna said, his voice now more acerbic. But I don't want you to rely on me completely. You have potential, real potential, but I won't hand everything to you. Strength must be earned. After hesitating, Naruto nodded slightly. All right. The dream, or whatever it was, then vanished into the darkness. His heart thumping, he jumped up in bed. The window let in filtered morning sunlight. Was it a dream? It's not a dream, brat. Naruto's gaze expanded. What? The voice inside his head said, we met. It happened. It's all real, and it was deep, assured, and slightly humorous. Naruto hastily tried to relax. How are we talking? Who are you? And, how the hell are you inside my head? When the voice said, my name is Sukuna. Ryomen Sukuna, and I've been inside you since 3 years ago. 3 years ago, murmured Naruto. Then he remembered the time he was beaten and forced to eat by an elderly, dubious villager. The idea made Naruto gag. You mean, that gross, dried-up finger? That, gross finger, was a fragment of my soul, Sukuna remarked, his voice smiling. That's how I'm here. Naruto fell silent, lost in contemplation. Can you train me? Why? With his voice steady, Naruto answered, you said you're the strongest, right? After a moment of silence, Sukuna laughed. Fine, I'll train you, but understand something, I won't teach you anything related to chakra or jutsu. Why not? Because I don't use chakra, Sukuna went back. I use something far older. Cursed energy. It's born from negative emotions. Fear, anger, hatred, pain. It's what fuels me. Naruto's fists clenched. That sounds like something I have a lot of. Exactly. Naruto watched the village gradually come to life in the morning light outside the window. He had changed his course. The village no longer just ignored him as a boy. He was a king's vessel. The actual training would then start. Naruto trained covertly after that day. Weeks and months passed before he was able to comprehend the sensation of cursed energy. In contrast to chakra, it fought against his will, snarling at the leash like an untamed animal. But the growth came quickly after he grasped it, even if only slightly. More quickly than even Sukuna anticipated. At last, the graduation day came. With his hands in his pockets and an unreadable face, Naruto stood in line with the other academy students. One by one, the teams were introduced. Naruto waited with simmering tension rather than excitement. And finally, Team 12, Iruka clapped. Naruto Uzumaki, Menma Uzumaki, Mito Uzumaki. The room echoed with a murmur. Mito became very happy. Yes, she exclaimed with excitement as she turned to face Naruto and Menma. We're together. Menma smirked languidly, barely taking in the news. Who he was paired with didn't really matter to him. It didn't matter as long as he could brag about it. Naruto remained silent. He didn't give them a glance. He balled his fists up. He thought bitterly, of course they'd put us together. Can't even let me breathe. Iruka went on, and your Jonin-sensei will be Kushina Uzumaki. It made Naruto's blood boil. He squinted his eyes. Mito let out a happy gasp. Mama's going to be our teacher too. That's amazing. Menma shrugged after displaying a hint of surprise. Naruto whitened his knuckles. Later, Kushina stood in front of the three at the training grounds. For most, the day was ideal for training because of the gentle wind that blew through the trees. All right, Kushina said with a kind smile. Menma, Mito, come with me. We'll begin training. Kushina didn't even glance in Naruto's direction as he stood motionless. Mito exclaimed, come on, as she hurried away with her brother and mother. For a moment, Naruto stood motionless. After saying that, he turned to leave. He went back into the forest, the location of his regular training sessions. By themselves. Keep quiet, not a word. He held up his hand. Cursed energy crackled like living flame around his fingers in faint black-red tendrils. Fine, he muttered with a bitter smirk. I'll train myself. Team 12 had been engaged in D-rank tasks for the past month, such as chasing chickens, pulling weeds, and rescuing cats. Menma and Mito were becoming irritated and were complaining to Kushina all the time. This is stupid, Menma grumbled one evening while kicking a stone. We're Uzumakis. We should be doing something real. Mito crossed her arms and nodded. We've been ready since the academy. When are we getting an actual mission? As usual, Naruto stood slightly apart from them and said nothing. Kushina let out a sigh. Fine, let's speak to the Hokage. They arrived at the office of the Hokage Tower to find Team 7 already there, with Mina appearing disinterested, Sakura bright-eyed, Sasuke with his arms crossed, and Kakashi leaning languidly against a wall. Minato remarked, perfect timing, as the Hokage's robe fluttered. You'll all be assigned a joint mission. Both teams. Mito blinked. A joint mission. You're to escort a man named Tazuna to the Land of Waves and protect him while he completes construction of a bridge. It's officially C rank. Naruto's eyes narrowed. A bridge builder. This isn't going to be simple. Together, the two groups traveled, with Kushina and Kakashi taking the lead. As usual, Naruto remained in the back. There was light conversation between Sakura and Mito, arguments between Menma and Mina, and sporadic remarks from Sasuke. Naruto's eyes then focused on something. A pool. He slowed a little as he thought. It's been days since it rained. His gaze grew piercing. Then, clang. From the puddle, chains shot out, encircling Kakashi and Kushina. With a sickening jerk, the two Jonin were drawn in and fell to the ground, apparently unconscious. Everybody froze. With their hideous claws gleaming, the two demon brothers appeared. Mito let out a scream. Sakura staggered back. With a growl, one of the brothers charged at Tazuna. The other licked Naruto's blade as he turned toward him. You're just a runt. Shish. An abrupt slash sliced through the atmosphere. The demon brother's eyes went wide as he froze in mid-step. From head to groin, his body gradually divided in two, vertically. A perfect, clean slice. Steam hissed from the cut as he fell in hideous halves. Everyone gaped in horror. Naruto remained still, his eyes cold and dark. He hadn't even moved his hand. Sakura gasped and asked, What was that? Even Kakashi, who was watching from behind the bushes, appeared in disbelief. How could he do that? I have never heard a jutsu like that. With a howl of rage, the remaining demon brother charged blindly at Naruto. Silently, Naruto muttered, Cleave and dismantle. SHNK. One more invisible cut. One more death. The air was hazy with blood. There was silence. Even the normally calm Sasuke took an unintentional step back. That technique. What it is. Kushina stood up slowly and looked at Naruto as if he were a stranger. Kakashi turned to Tazuna, his face serious. Tell us the truth. Who are you really running from? After a brief pause, Tazuna took a deep breath before continuing. It's Gato. He's the one behind the threats. He wants me dead before I finish the bridge. If he succeed, the land of waves will crumble. Please, you have to help me. Kushina's expression hardened as she crossed her arms. We can't afford to put our team in danger. You've seen how inexperienced they are. They're not ready for this kind of mission. As he moved forward, Tazuna's voice trembled and his eyes grew wide with fear. I'm telling you the truth. Without your help, we won't make it. You'll leave us all to die. Tazuna received a pitying glance from Kakashi, but his words were stern. We can't risk our young shinobi's lives. This is too much for them. Tazuna fell to his knees, his desperation growing. Please, the villagers, the people of Wave, they're all depending on me. I can't fail them. I'll die if you leave me now. As the other members of the team began to head back toward the village, Naruto remained motionless, his eyes unreadable and far away. With a hint of worry in her voice, Kushina called out to him. Naruto, come on, we're heading back. Yet Naruto remained motionless. With a glint of resolve on his face, he continued to stare straight ahead. I'll go with him. Everyone froze in shock as the words lingered in the air. Kushina gave Naruto a fierce look. Naruto, you can't do this. You shouldn't go without your team. With a sardonic tone in his voice, Naruto arched an eyebrow. Really? We've been genins for a month. Have you even bothered to train me or notice me in the team? Don't preach about teamwork like a saint. It honestly sickens me to hear it from you. His remarks stunned the group, causing them to fall silent. Unable to believe what he had just said, Kushina stood there. Menma took advantage of the situation to make fun of him by saying, of course, who would bother training a loser like you? After sharpening his glare, Naruto's face changed to one of mockery. Oh, tell me, who ran off to hide behind the bushes while the rest of us protected Tazuna? And who killed the demon brothers without even lifting a finger? It's obvious, isn't it? You ran like a coward, and I killed the demon brothers without even moving. So, tell me, who's the real loser here? Menma didn't answer. Without saying anything more, Naruto turned and followed Tazuna. The others stood silently, deciding what to do next, while Naruto walked beside Tazuna. The silence was broken by Sasuke, who turned to face Kakashi. I think we should continue the mission. If we keep hiding behind the excuse that we're not ready, we'll never be ready when it truly matters. Kakashi's expression was unreadable as he looked at Kushina. Unable to contain her disappointment, Mito spoke up. Mom, Sasuke's right, and I'm disappointed in you. For an entire month, you never bothered to call Naruto to train. The others grudgingly followed, Mito and Sasuke at the forefront. They came upon Zabuza, the infamous renegade ninja, as they were strolling along. Without hesitation, Kushina and Kakashi moved forward to engage him in combat. Despite their tension, the others watched the fight from a distance. But Naruto wasn't merely observing, he was closely assessing Zabuza's strength, analyzing each move, and using his intellect to determine the best course of action in the face of such a threat. A sudden dart pierced Zabuza's back just as it appeared that he would strike Kakashi fatally. In an instant, a masked figure emerged from the darkness, quickly seized the injured renegade ninja, and vanished along with him. For a brief moment, the group stood in shock, attempting to comprehend the sudden change in circumstances. After taking a moment to gather their thoughts, Kakashi and Kushina guided the group to Tazuna's residence. Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter, welcomed them inside and gave them a place to stay and rest following the tense encounter. There was tension in the air as they ate dinner. Tsunami's son, Inari, screamed out abruptly, his voice full of annoyance. You don't know what it means to suffer. Anger boiled up inside Naruto, hardening his eyes. Shut up, brat, you think you're the only one in the world who's suffering. Wake up, he snapped back, slamming his hand on the table and speaking in a harsh, piercing voice. Naruto wasn't done, but Inari, surprised by the outburst, was silent for a while. A bitter tone ran through his voice as he gestured to Kushina. See that woman, my so-called pathetic mother, she never cared about me, never noticed me, she neglected me, and now look at her with her perfect little family. Then, with a chilly expression, he pointed at Menma. And that pathetic boy, who looks like me, my so-called brother. All he does is bark, but there's no bite. He doesn't work hard, a lazy sloth who thinks even lifting a finger is a burden, expects everything to be handed to him on a silver platter. As he went on, Naruto's voice shook with repressed anger, and his eyes grew darker. And my so-called pathetic excuse of a Hokage. Mentioning him wanted to puke out. I don't even know why, but he hates me with a passion. That fool swapped my grades with fool, so this idiot would get all the attention. When I found out what happened, I barely passed all the exams just to keep the peace. And the villagers, they're worse than all of them combined. They call me a monster, a freak. I'm just a punching bag for their frustration. With everyone's attention on Naruto, who was now standing there with his chest heaving from the weight of his words, the room fell silent. Tsunami could only watch with a mix of understanding and sympathy as she saw the anguish in his eyes. But for the first time, Inari appeared to understand the significance of what Naruto had said. The rage and frustration in Naruto's voice made him doubt his own perspective on life, and he was unable to speak. Everyone at the table fell silent in shock. Kakashi was shocked by what he was hearing because he had always thought of his sensei's family as ideal. Sasuke was also taken aback. He had always questioned why Naruto treated his brother Menma with such contempt, but now he understood. It was evident that none of them had yet to completely comprehend the extent of Naruto's suffering, and the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Kushina sat motionless as waves of guilt swept over her. She had never imagined that her son would say such things, and now that she was aware of the reality, she was unsure of how to react. At last, Kakashi broke the silence by speaking. He asked in a softer than normal tone, "Is it true, Kushina-san?" With a hint of the same incredulity he felt. Kushina didn't say anything, her eyes lowering to the table as she couldn't meet anyone's gaze. Mito spoke up because she could no longer contain her rage. "Mom, tell me why you both treated Naruto like nothing. You believed Menma's lies and punished Naruto for things he didn't do." Even though Kushina was still unable to speak, Mito continued. "Remember every time Dad hit Naruto for beating Menma? That wasn't the truth. In reality, it was this fool," she indicated to Menma, "who's too lazy to work hard, who thought Naruto used some hidden scrolls, and blamed Naruto for everything. And Dad believed it all and punished Naruto for nothing. And you," Mito's tone changed, but she remained focused onto Kushina. "You never even bothered to get to know him. You just stood by." Menma yelled defensively, now that he knew he had been caught red-handed. "Hey, why did you tell them that?" Mito gave him a fierce look, her eyes piercing with rage. "Shut up, brat. Be glad he didn't kill you like he did those demon brothers. Don't act like you didn't deserve it." Still mute, Kushina was clearly trembling. She was forced to face the agonizing reality after Mito's words pierced her. Mito then faced her mother once more, her voice brimming with passion. "No, Mom, according to her. Tell me, what's his favorite food? When was the last time you cooked it for him? Or even asked him about it?" Kushina stumbled. She was unable to respond. "Exactly," Mito said in a sorrowful tone. "You don't know. You never even bothered to ask, because as Naruto said, you never saw him. You never loved him." Kushina appeared to have taken a severe blow. She never thought the words would hurt as much as they did. In the most agonizing way, she had let her son down. Mito softened slightly, her eyes sad as she gazed at her mother. "There is something wrong with me too, Mom," she secretly acknowledged. "I didn't hate Naruto, but I turned a blind eye to his suffering. I didn't love him like I should have. I ignored him just as much as you did." Remorse twisted Kushina's heart, but it was too much to process all at once. Having been silently observing, Kakashi now spoke once more in a disappointed tone. "Kushina-san, you and Sensei always give speeches about family in public or gatherings and say how perfect it is. But in reality, it's broken. I'm disappointed in you both." The room seemed to be suffocated by the weight of everything that had been said, and the words hung in the air. For the first time, it seemed as though everyone could see the flaws in the facade of their supposedly flawless lives, and they all had their own regrets and guilt to bear. Zabuza and Haku attacked again a week later. Just as Kakashi was about to strike the last blow, Naruto suddenly stepped in. He quickly pushed Zabuza out of danger and saved him, letting Haku get away. Uncertain of Naruto's intentions, the group was in disbelief. When the tension started to subside, Gato and his goons showed up and demanded command of the situation. Naruto moved forward without hesitation, his eyes icy with resolve. He showed no mercy as he mercilessly took Gato's life in a cruel and unforgiving way. Anyone who dared to cross him was sent a chilling message by his quick and decisive actions. Officially, the mission was over. In appreciation for their help, Chizuna dubbed the recently finished bridge, the Great Naruto Bridge, which is evidence of the fortitude and determination Naruto showed during the ordeal. Kushina was unable to contain himself as the group returned to the village. She took a step in Naruto's direction, her heart heavy with guilt. Naruto, I know I've failed you. I want to apologize. I never meant to hurt you, not really, she said, her voice shaking. Naruto didn't even give her a sidelong glance. He continued to stare straight ahead, his piercing silence more audible than any words. He stated bluntly, "The damage is done," in a voice as icy as the wind rustling the trees. "You can apologize all you want, but it won't change anything." Desperate to explain, Kushina took a tentative step closer, her heart sinking. "Please, Naruto, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to feel neglected, I never wanted you to feel like you weren't loved." At last, Naruto turned to look at her, his eyes piercing with resentment. As if to slap her, he said, "You're not sorry, Kushina." "Not really." He inhaled and his voice grew icier. "What you're feeling is guilt. Not regret, not love. Guilt." He paused and fixed his unwavering intensity on her eyes. "If this had stayed in the shadows, if I hadn't exposed it all to the world, you would have let it slide, wouldn't you?" He asked. "You'd keep pretending, going on like nothing ever happened. But now that the truth is out in the open, you're only feeling sorry because people know. Not because you care." Kushina started to reply, but her words would not come. The unvarnished honesty in Naruto's voice made her feel as though everything she said would be in vain. She wanted to apologize and put things right. With his back to the group, Naruto turned away from her. "I don't need your apology," he said softly, less to others than to himself. "The past is done, and I'm done with all of you." He left Kushina standing there, feeling the weight of her failures sink deeper into her heart, without saying another word. They informed the Hokage of what they had done. Minato's expression tensed as he questioned, "Why did you continue with such a dangerous mission? It wasn't your place to make that decision." Naruto stood icily, his voice uncompromising. "It was my decision. I did what I wanted to do it and I didn't compel your precious wife and two adorable kids to come with me, they came on their own," he said with unwavering eyes. Minato's tone became more irate. "You defied the orders of your superiors. You disrespected me, the Hokage." Naruto's answer was as incisive as ever. "I don't care if you're the Hokage or not. The truth is, you don't act like one, so don't think just because you sit in the Hokage seat, you've earned my respect." Minato yelled, "I am the Hokage, and I am your father." With a commanding voice. With an icy smirk on his face, Naruto scoffed. He scoffed, his tone brimming with contempt. "Oh really?" His eyes narrowed into a lethal glare as he stepped forward and asked, "Since when did you start seeing me as your son?" "All my life. You hated me. You ignored me. You favored those two brats over me. Menma and Mito, your perfect little children." Naruto wasn't finished, but Minato's expression wavered. His tone became more piercing. "You didn't care about me. You forged records to hide my achievements, beat me when I dared question your decisions. You let the village tear me down while you watched. You never, not once, treated me like a son." Minato's heart sank beneath the weight of Naruto's words, and his breath caught. For a moment, his vision became blurry as he was overcome by regret and guilt. Naruto was not done, though. "You're pathetic," exclaimed Naruto. He moved closer, his eyes penetrating. "Pathetic as a father and as Hokage. You chose those brats, and now you want me to believe you're some kind of hero, some kind of father figure." He said, "You failed me, Minato. And you'll never fix it. Not now, not ever." Minato winced as though every word were a blow to the body. His mind was racing, trying to think of something to say, something to correct the situation. However, nothing appeared. He was left with nothing to do but stand there, feeling the gap between him and Naruto widening every second. For a moment, Naruto stood motionless, his shoulders burdened by his choice. His back was to the family that had let him down, to the village, and to those who had harmed him. He inhaled deeply, and his voice came out icy and determined. His words pierced the silence like a blade, echoing, "I'm done with this village. Done with all of you. I'm leaving. I don't need your pity, your apologies, or your false love." He stopped, his eyes fixed unblinkingly on the future. From now on, I'm renouncing my family name. I am just Naruto. Just Naruto. No Uzumaki, no Namikaze. With a worried expression on her face, Mito moved forward to try to get to him. Naruto, please, don't, she said in a beseeching tone. Naruto, however, didn't look at her. The look on her face was not necessary for him to see. He no longer cared about the hurt, the regret, or the sympathy. His body tensed from the choice he had already made. He stepped forward again. No, Mito, he said in a firm, low voice. Don't bother trying to stop me. I've had enough. Without even looking, Mito avoided her as he reached out. She pleaded one final time, Naruto, please, but Naruto had already started to move. Now a familiar companion, the pain in his chest was not a weakness but rather a strength as he walked past her. Naruto left the village, his past, and everything he had known without saying another word. The only sound left behind after his departure was the distant sound of his footsteps. He was finished, and he experienced the liberation of being himself for the first time in his life. Only Naruto. With his mind clear and his plan finally put into action, Naruto sat motionless. Calmly determined, he addressed his inner presence, Sukuna. The plan begins now. Sukuna answered in a steady voice from inside his head. Yes, it's time. After setting out on his quest, Naruto spent days traversing uncharted territory before locating the two individuals he was looking for, Zabuza and Haku. Their faces were grim and exhausted from the hardships they had faced as they sat by a campfire. Without hesitation, Naruto moved closer, his presence demanding attention. Naruto started off by saying, I'm not here to fight, in a steady but authoritative tone. I'm here to offer you something. Constantly skeptical, Zabuza squinted. And what's that? Another promise of power or a foolish offer? Regardless of the tone, Naruto maintained his composure. I'm creating a village, a place called Ryomen. It'll be a sanctuary for outcasts like us, those who have been betrayed, those who have been neglected, the orphans, the lost souls. My goal is to make Ryomen the strongest, a place of peace. Zabuza gazed at him, uncertain. Why should we trust you? Why should we join you? Naruto's voice remained unflinching, but his eyes hardened a little. Because I saved you, Zabuza. Do you want to run for the rest of your life, always looking over your shoulder? Or do you want to stand tall, respected, and safe? With a conflicted yet inquisitive expression, Haku gazed at Naruto. And if we join you, what's the guarantee? How can we trust that you won't betray us like everyone else? Naruto stepped forward, his eyes softening. If you join me, I'll make sure you are safe, Haku. I'll make sure you're treated with respect, and that no one ever dares to put you down again. This is not about me, it's about creating something better for all of us. Zabuza gave his chin a contemplative rub, obviously taking the offer into account. Even if we wanted to, we're still affiliated with the Mist. The village is in the middle of a civil war. We can't just abandon that easily. Naruto looked him in the eye without flinching. If you join me, I will end the civil war. You won't need to run anymore. For a moment, Zabuza remained silent as the words sank in. Even if we agree, there's still the matter of Mai Terumi. She's the rebel leader, and she might become the next Mizukage. She's not likely to let us go that easily. Naruto maintained his composure and unwavering resolve. Then I'll speak to her. I'll handle it. If you trust me, this will be the beginning of something new for all of us. Though they were still hesitant, Zabuza and Haku exchanged glances as Naruto's words lingered in the air like a promise. They nodded slowly. Zabuza said, "We'll follow you," in a steady but hesitant tone. Though it was more of a knowing smirk, Naruto grinned. Good. Then let's end this war and build a place where we don't have to run anymore. Naruto then took the lead as the three of them headed toward the hidden mist. The future of Ryomen was beginning to take shape, and the winds of change were already stirring. Haku, Zabuza, and Naruto reached the hidden mist village a few days later. Mai Terumi, the Mizukage herself, greeted them as they came to the village gates, her face displaying a mix of authority and mistrust. With calculating and keen eyes, Naruto took a step forward. He stated, "I've come to make a deal," in a steady voice. "I'll end the civil war in an hour. But in exchange, you have to let Zabuza go free." Mai gave him a narrowed look. "And why should I believe you? What's in this for me? How do I know you won't betray us like everyone else has?" Naruto's gaze remained fixed, and he exuded a serene assurance. He stated plainly, I have my plans, with an unnerving air of confidence. You want to end the bloodshed. This is your chance. Mei took a moment to consider the ramifications before answering. She said in a doubtful tone, "You're asking a lot. You want me to just let Zabuza go? What guarantee do I have that you can actually end this war?" A hint of impatience crept into Naruto's tone, and his face hardened. His eyes met hers, challenging her to think twice. How many more shinobi need to die before you act? Hundreds are already losing their lives. Do you want to continue playing games while the village burns, or do you want to save lives? He asked. You can either let me handle this, or watch more blood spill. The choice is yours. With growing frustration, Mei balled her fists. Although she was a leader, she felt the consequences of this choice. After a tense silence, she finally spoke in a tight voice. Fine, I'll allow it, but I'll come with you. I need to see this for myself. Naruto acknowledged her choice with a single nod. Of course, let's move quickly. They started out without further delay. The group moved quickly through the crowded village and arrived at the battlefield, where Yagura, the former Mizukage, and his army were encamped. Yagura was regarded as a strong and merciless leader, and the mist forces had long been a source of trouble for the village under his control. But Naruto remained unfazed. Arriving in stealth, they easily slipped past the remaining shinobi. Now that he had complete control over his strength, Naruto used his cleave and dismantle skills. When the shinobi attempted to fight him, they were surgically dispatched, their bodies falling to the ground as if they had never been there. At last they arrived in Yagura. Seated smugly on his throne, the former Mizukage narrowed his eyes at their approach. Naruto moved like lightning before he could utter a single word. His cleave cut through Yagura's body in a single clean stroke, dividing it into several parts. The former Mizukage was gone, and blood splattered everywhere. With his face expressionless and his breath even, Naruto stood over the fallen body. See, I kept my word. Mei, who had been observing in silence, felt a shiver go through her. Although she was aware that Yagura was a monster, it was still unnerving and astounding to see his life taken so easily and carelessly. You, she started, her voice faltering, but she was at a loss for words. She had misjudged him. Still unable to read his face, Naruto wiped the blood from his blade. The war is over, you're welcome. Zabuza, who had remained silent during the entire ordeal, turned to face Naruto with a renewed sense of reverence. Even the most powerful leaders could not ignore this man because he was more than just a talker, he was a force to be reckoned with. Mei let out a sharp breath, her thoughts racing. The war is over, she said quietly again, still taking in the enormity of what had just transpired. I don't know what to say. Then don't, Naruto stated in a chilly tone. Now that the initial phase of constructing Ryomen was finished, Naruto, Zabuza, and Haku proceeded with their adventure. They promised betrayed genins a place free from betrayal and took in orphans. Zabuza taught water jutsu and kenjutsu, while Naruto concentrated on wind techniques. Naruto trained them. They developed trust in a matter of months. More orphans were taken in by Naruto, who trained those who volunteered. One step at a time, Ryomen started to take shape as the group's bond grew stronger. Within a few months, the pupils trained by Naruto and Zabuza advanced from novices to mid-chunin level. Despite being split up into two teams, Naruto made sure they learned how to collaborate. Naruto improved their speed and coordination by teaching them the body flicker technique as the chunin exams drew near. Remember, even if you're in two teams, you're one team, Naruto advised them in a firm but supportive tone. Don't fight unnecessarily, and don't put yourselves at risk. If you fail, it's not the end. We'll try again. Look out for each other's backs. Teams were formed. Under Haku's leadership, Kurin, Ren, and Jin formed a single team. Zabuza led the second team, which consisted of Maizu, Mai, and Misa. Each team was ready and excited for the impending chunin exams as they set out for Konoha together. On their way, Naruto reminded them, show Konoha what you're capable of, but remember, it's not just about passing the exams. It's about proving to yourselves what you've learned and how far you've come. Make me proud. Make them regret ever turning their backs on you, Naruto said in a firm yet composed tone. Don't seek revenge. Make them question why they betrayed you in the first place. He then watched his students leave for the chunin exams while remaining in Ryomen. Naruto remained in Ryomen, silently keeping watch over the kids he had adopted, each of whom served as a reminder of the harshness of the world and his vow to make it a better place. After rerouting the funds of Gato's company, which he now controlled and renamed Ryomen Industries, Naruto proceeded to construct the village from the ground up. He summoned a former architect of Gato's who was now devoted to Ryomen. Naruto clearly outlined his vision when they first met. No statues, no walls to divide people, training grounds, shelter, clean water, and open skies. This village isn't built for power, it's built for those the world threw away. After examining him for a while, the architect nodded. I'll begin the designs. The only thing Naruto said was, make it a home. Team Zabuza and Team Haku both made an impression during the Chunin exams. They complied with Naruto's orders to refrain from needless violence, but they didn't think twice when they were surrounded. The only casualty of the matches was a sound ninja who fell. Among the Genin and Jonin ranks, rumors circulated about the enigmatic village known as Ryomen. All 6 of Ryomen's Genin made easy progress after the preliminary stages. Their discipline, accuracy, and teamwork were not overlooked. Zabuza and Haku were approached by Kakashi, Kushina, Sasuke, Sakura, Mito, Menma, and Mina from the stands. Kushina looked at them suspiciously and asked, "What are you doing here?" "We're here for our Genin teams," Zabuza said bluntly in response. Kakashi scowled. "Your headbands, they're not from the mist. What village are you representing?" Calmly, "You noticed," Haku said. "We're no longer affiliated with the Hidden Mist. We now serve Ryomen." "Ryomen?" Mito asked again, laughing. "That new village, it's barely a few months old. How can it produce Genin this skilled?" Zabuza laughed. "Hard work beats entitlement, unlike those who think being the Hokage's children makes them invincible." Menma snarled under his breath and narrowed his eyes. Zabuza then took a look around. "Speaking of blondes, where's the other one? The kid who saved us, the real deal, not this fake one." Pointing to Menma. When Naruto was mentioned, Kushina and Mito tensed up. Their faces were obscured by a shadow. "He left the village," Kushina discreetly acknowledged. Haku's forehead wrinkled. "Why?" Kushina said. "We neglected him," in a guilty tone. "Ignored him for too long." Haku and Zabuza fell silent, their eyes full of judgment rather than consolation. The arena reverberated with Minato's voice. "The preliminary rounds are over. The final stage will take place in 1 month." Team Haku and Team Zabuza then departed Konoha in silence and headed back to Ryomen. Kurin appeared perplexed. "Why are we leaving already?" Zabuza gave her a quick look. "We'll be back in a month." Mai noted, "But the other teams are staying in Konoha." "We know," said Zabuza acerbically. "But that place isn't home. Not for us." "Is it because what Naruto-sama went in this village?" asked Ren. Throughout the trip, Zabuza and Haku remained silent because they believed it to be true. Minato scanned the latest Chunin exams reports while sitting in the strategy room in Konoha. One name caught his attention, Ryomen. His brows furrowed, he muttered, "A newly formed village, producing Genin this skilled in just a few months. How is that possible?" The doors opened at that moment. Jiraiya waved languidly as she walked in. "Yo, Minato, thought I'd drop in and check on my favorite students." With a slight smile, Minato got up to meet him. "It's good to see you, Jiraiya-sensei." Minato's tone became more serious after a few light-hearted greetings. "Would you consider training Mito and Menma for the finals?" Jiraiya gave a nod. "Of course, but what about the other one? That boy, what was his name?" "Naruto. Last I heard, he was a prodigy even beyond Itachi. Where is he?" Minato silently lowered his head. At that moment, Kushina came in, followed by Mito and Menma. Jiraiya smiled at them, as he always does. "There's my god kids." He surveyed the area. "Hey, where's Naruto?" Kushina's face tightened as she hesitated. Menma sneered before she could respond. "TCH, don't bring up that traitor." Smack. Menma felt Mito's hand firmly touch the back of her head. "Don't you dare call him that," she yelled. "This whole mess, him leaving, us losing him, it started because you were too lazy to train and expected things to be handed to you and mom and dad treated him like trash." Menma rubbed the back of his head and tightened his jaw, but he remained silent. Jiraiya's grin dimmed, his normally playful eyes became icy. He whispered, "He left." Kushina gave a nod. "And I don't think he's coming back." Jiraiya scowled. "I'm asking again, where is Naruto?" With a look of shame on her face, Kushina turned away. "He left the village, he cut all ties with us." Jiraiya's face became stern. "Left? Why?" Minato remained silent. Kushina was the one who responded. Because we treated him like he didn't matter. With a tone of incredulity, Jiraiya gazed at her. And you didn't think to tell me. If I had known, I would have found him, helped him. When did this happen? Muttered. A few months ago, Minato said. Jiraiya's voice was bitter as she exhaled slowly. Minato, Kushina, how could you be so blind? You neglected Naruto, your own son, for the sake of the Jinchuriki. An uncomfortable, thick pause ensued. Then Mito said something softly. It wasn't just neglect. Everybody looked at her. From what I remember, Dad hated Naruto with vigor. He swapped Naruto's grades with Menma's in the academy to make Menma look more talented. Mito, exclaimed Kushina, but she went on. We were all a team, me, Menma and Naruto. But Mom never once called Naruto for training. Every time we went out to train, he was left behind. Like a dense fog, silence descended. Jiraiya's fists clenched. He stated icily, you didn't lose him because he was weak. You lost him because you made him believe he didn't belong. With a sharp yet low voice, Jiraiya turned to Minato. What is this, Minato? How can you love one child and hate the other? Minato kept his head down and said nothing. Jiraiya turned to look at Kushina. And you, Kushina, you're a value family more than anything. How could you turn your back on your own son? Guilt burning behind her eyes, Kushina's hands trembled. With a tone of disappointment, Jiraiya went on, I don't know where I went wrong teaching you, but I never expected this from you. He then faced Menma. And you, blaming Naruto because you're too lazy to work hard. I didn't blame him. He used some secret scrolls to get strong. Menma retorted, his voice rising. Like a hammer, silence fell on the room. Then Mito hit Menma on the back of the head with a smack. Then she hissed, idiot, how many times do I have to tell you? He read the same scrolls we read. She gave him a fierce look. He reads. He trains. He doesn't waste time bragging about being the Hokage's kid. He's naturally gifted, but he worked harder than all of us combined. Menma gave him a head rub but remained silent. Jiraiya's voice became a little softer. And you all let him walk away thinking he didn't matter. Jiraiya looked down at Menma with his arms crossed. Boy, if you keep acting like this, you're going to get yourself killed. You've got two options. Either drop the dream of being a shinobi or leave that laziness behind and work. There was silence in the room. Menma yelled, no way, her eyes wide. I dreamed of becoming Hokage. Jiraiya remained unflinching. Then come outside. Show me what you've got. They made their way to the training area. It was a brief test. Brutal, biased. Sweat-soaked and gasping for air, Menma fell to the ground. According to Jiraiya, you can't even last 5 minutes, she stated icily. And you're breathing like you've fought a war. If you go into battle like this, you'll die before your mission starts. At this level, you can't even call yourself a genin, in fact you should still be in academy. Menma's complexion turned white. Why you're lying, you're only saying this because you're mad Naruto left. Jiraiya slowly shook his head. No, ask any other genin. Hell, even your teammates. They'd say the same. Kushina and Minato stood silently with their heads down. The harsh words, you two were too blinded by pride, came from Jiraiya. You neglected one son emotionally, and destroyed the other through arrogance. With a steely voice, Jiraiya turned to face Menma. You've got 1 month. I'm going to whip you into shape myself. If you fail the exams after that, you give up the dream of being a shinobi. Silently, Menma swallowed. Jiraiya said, good, and left. Training starts tomorrow at dawn. Don't be late. Without any justifications or shortcuts, Jiraiya assumed complete accountability for Menma's training from that point on. Meanwhile, shaken by everything, Kushina concentrated her energies on assisting Mito in becoming stronger. Both parents eventually came forward in the shadow of their guilt, but only time would tell if it was too late. After a month, the day of the finals finally came. Everyone was anticipating the matches with great anticipation, and the atmosphere was charged with excitement. Now the leader of Ryomen Village, Naruto made the decision to go. As soon as he sat in the VIP area, rumors started to spread. Curiosity was high because people had heard that he was the leader of the recently established village. Menma vs. Kirin was the day's first match. Is that the Hokage's son? Naruto asked Makoto as he watched from the VIP area. Makoto gave a nod. Yes, that's Menma. I heard he's useless, Naruto said nonchalantly, his tone tinged with mockery. Some in the vicinity laughed, but Makoto, who was there, scowled at the remark. Makoto said, Watch your mouth, in a severe tone. Unfazed, Naruto shrugged. What? I'm just saying what the Jonins in my village said. They encountered him before and said he's all bark, no bite. Kushina came into the VIP area and sat next to Makoto before she could reply. When Kushina heard the conversation, his face darkened. Makoto said, Kushina, this boy is blabbering about Menma and badmouthing him, as she worriedly glanced at Naruto. I'm not disparaging anyone, Naruto calmly answered. I'm just stating the truth. Kushina recognized the voice and froze. Naruto, she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of astonishment and desire. With an expression devoid of emotion, Naruto turned to face her. He said, Hello, mother, in a tone devoid of the love it once possessed. The coldness of his words struck Kushina's chest more forcefully than she had anticipated. Trying to hide her anguish, she said, What are you doing here? We've been looking for you. With a detached expression, Naruto answered casually, I'm here to represent my village, Ryomen. As its leader, I'm obligated to attend. You're the leader of Ryomen. But how could such a new village produce talented genin so quickly? Makoto asked, still in shock at the revelation. Naruto responded without hesitation, but his eyes shifted to the match that was still going on. Unlike the genins of Konoha, my genins work hard. They don't brag about their skills or about being clan heirs, even though they have natural talent. I made sure of that. They work twice harder than ever. As Kushina took in what he had said, guilt began to seep into her. With a voice full of regret, she said, Naruto, why did you leave us? Makoto looked bewilderedly at Kushina. Is he really your son? With the burden of years lost bearing down on her, Kushina nodded. Kushina's expression remained as distant as ever as Naruto met his gaze. Don't you know the reason? He asked, his voice icy and laced with unsaid suffering. As the VIPs carried on talking, Menma and Corinne's match started. Menma had trouble right away. Corinne was accurate and efficient and didn't want to drag things out. He quickly chopped Menma's neck, rendering him unconscious. The stadium echoed with gasps. It ended so abruptly that the audience was taken aback. Makoto remarked, he's really strong, with admiration. With composure, Naruto answered, yes. His specialty is targeting pressure points, he doesn't believe in wasting time. Did you train him? Inquired Kushina. Naruto gave a nod, along with Zabuza and Haku. As the matches progressed, the suspense for the final matchup between Sasuke and Gaara increased. At first, Sasuke had the advantage. Gaara was forced into a corner by his quickness and accuracy. Then Gaara became uncontrollable. His body transformed into a miniature form of Shukaku, the one-tailed beast, and he let out a twisted scream. The stadium was suddenly rocked by a huge explosion that blew the rooftop to pieces. Many people were paralyzed as a wave of genjutsu swept through the crowd. The invasion was underway. Under the leadership of Orochimaru, Suna and the Sound Village forces poured in. Naruto's face grew serious. He felt a surge of rage. He leapt out of the VIP area and chased after Gaara without hesitation. Naruto moved quickly, but Sasuke and a few Konoha genin trailed closely behind. He was the first to catch up to Gaara. Naruto didn't slow down as Temari and Kankuro hurried in to defend their brother. He had no mercy in his eyes. Without hesitation, he dispatched the siblings with a quick combination of cleave and dismantle. Dead, they fell. Naruto was shocked when Shukaku failed to come out of Gaara's body. To be clear, he didn't understand what he was doing. Of course, if the Jinchuriki dies, the tailed beast dies too. When Sasuke and the other genin arrived a few moments later, they were shocked to see Naruto standing silently among the dead Gaara and his siblings. With tears in her eyes, Mito hurried forward upon seeing him. Ni-san. She extended her arm to embrace him, but Naruto pushed her back. He spoke in a flat tone. Don't. Mito froze in disbelief. They no longer knew the Naruto they had known. No. It was a chilly voice. Flat. Dead. Everybody froze. A cold shiver went through Mito's body. Sakura, Shino, Shikamaru, and Sasuke stood in shock. It had been months since they had last seen Naruto. And here he was now. Not the Naruto they recalled, though. His spiky blonde hair had grown longer and wilder, and he looked entirely different. He had a stronger, leaner body. He was dressed in black boots, black pants, and a black half-sleeve shirt. His Hittite had changed from bearing the hidden leaf symbol to something completely different and alien. He had changed. Mito's worried voice cracked. Naruto, where have you been? Do you have any idea how much we missed you? Naruto squinted his eyes. We, he said in an emotionless tone. Yes, me, Mom, Dad, Menma, we've all been worried. Naruto sneered, his tone becoming resentful. Don't call them my mom and dad. They lost that right a long time ago. They're just the ones who gave birth to me. Mito winced, his voice sharpening. He added, and you, since when did you start caring about me? She stated, I've always cared, and moved forward. With an angry tone, Naruto asked, do you really expect me to believe that? As far as I remember, I was treated like trash. Like I didn't matter. No, Naruto, that's not true. Then tell me, he interrupted, what changed? Mito said nothing. If it was because of the wave mission, or that day when I finally snapped, don't pretend that changed anything, Naruto said in a tone of subdued rage. If I hadn't spoken up, nothing would be different. You would have kept ignoring me. So don't act like it never happened. Like a dense fog, silence descended upon the group. Then, Naruto disappeared. As simple as that. Nobody said anything, not initially. Sasuke fixed his gaze on the vacant spot where Naruto had been. He balled his fists up. At least in part, he understood. That day, he had been there. He was aware of Naruto's suffering. And now he was plagued by a strong sense of regret. Only Naruto had the audacity to confront Sasuke and stand by his side, and he was the only one who saw him for who he was, not as Itachi's little brother. That had never been returned by Sasuke. He ought to have. What a drag, Shikamaru said in a low, solemn voice. His gaze strayed to Gaara's corpse. He killed Gaara, like it was nothing. At the Chunin exam site, the battle raged high above the stadium. Orochimaru and the resurrected first and second Hokages were a terrifying foe that Minato, Jiraiya, and Hiruzen had to contend with. However, the Edo Tensei bound the undead founders of Konoha, making them unbeatable. They just regenerated regardless of the amount of damage they sustained. Hiruzen's forehead wrinkled. He was aware of what needed to be done. According to Hiruzen's grim statement, Minato, Jiraiya, fall back. I have a plan. Then Jiraiya said, what is it, sensei? Hiruzen remained silent. Rather, he started making hand signals. Minato and Jiraiya both recognized it right away, the Death Reaper seal. Jiraiya shouted, Sensei, no. With alarm. Are you crazy? That jutsu will kill you. Hiruzen gave a small smile. I've lived a long life, Jiraiya. I have few regrets, but two still haunt me. 1. Failing to end Orochimaru when I had the chance. And 2. Standing by and watching while Minato turned his back on Naruto. I should have helped that boy. Orochimaru laughed sarcastically. Oh, Minato. Favoritism over talent. What a shame. I know how your precious firstborn is all talk, while Naruto, now he was a genius. But you couldn't see past your pride. Minato yelled, shut up, you snake. In a voice racked with anger and guilt. Orochimaru's malevolent eyes gleamed as he sneered, Kukuku, did I hit a nerve, Minato? Deny it all you want, but deep down you know it's true. With the guilt etched on his face like fissures in porcelain, Minato clenched his fists. Orochimaru grinned broadly. I heard a rather fascinating tale. They say Naruto, your forgotten son, has built his own village. Trained genin who've surpassed even Konoha's best, and all in a matter of months. No academy, no elite Jonin senseis, just him. He gave a gloomy laugh. Imagine what he could have become, if I had met him first. He would have made a magnificent ally. Strong, smart, unshackled by your village's hypocrisy. Minato's eyes were blazing with anger and pain. You bastard, he yelled, his fists exploding with lightning. Kukuku, you abandoned greatness, Minato, asserted Orochimaru in a chilly tone. A cool, sharp voice said, oh, I'm flattered you think of me so highly, from behind them. Everyone pivoted. Naruto was standing on the rooftop's edge. Curious, even the resurrected first and second Hokages hesitated. Slowly, Naruto advanced while focusing his gaze on the founders of the village's undead forms. Naruto nodded to the first and second and remarked, you're creepy, Orochimaru, but summoning them. I didn't think you were that desperate. Orochimaru smiled. Think about it. The very founders of Konoha, destroying what they once built. Poetic, isn't it? No, said Naruto icily. It's pathetic. The smile on Orochimaru's face wavered. What did you say? I said, if I were you, I would have brought back Madara Uchiha, Naruto said nonchalantly. At least he had a real grudge. He defected for a reason. You have a point, Orochimaru said reflectively. Naruto went on to say, but you're wasting your time with Konoha. With genuine curiosity, Orochimaru inquired, what do you mean? Naruto's eyes grew gloomy. The image you see of Konoha is just a mask. Shallow. Fragile. A village that preaches will of fire but practices favoritism. A Hokage who turns a blind eye to injustice and calls it leadership. A place where people can't even tell the difference between a kunai and a sealing scroll. He hesitated. I was hated, beaten, feared. Everyone believed I was the Kyuubi reincarnated. But the truth is, I never had the Kyuubi sealed inside me. I was a scapegoat, a child to carry blame, to wear hatred, Naruto remarked sourly. All while your golden child, Menma, bathed in your love. Hashirama, the first Hokage, appeared to be troubled as well. This isn't the Konoha I built. Tobirama gave a solemn nod. Favoritism weakens a village from within. With remorse and worry, Naruto called Minato, but Naruto remained motionless. Naruto's voice, hey, old man, sliced through the tension like a blade. Be calm. Chilly. Managed. What are you trying to do? Hiruzen continued to make hand signals. He had a serious expression. What I should have done years ago. I'm ending him. Naruto's eyes squinted. You think you can. Be honest. He's like a snake. He'll slither away before you finish the jutsu. Orochimaru laughed and clapped slowly. Well, Naruto, I didn't know you held me in such high regard. No, said Naruto firmly. You're just a bastard that needs to be put down. Orochimaru's ego was bruised, but he did a good job of hiding it. His smile wavered. You heard me right, Naruto went on. I don't want you hindering me in the future. So I'm ending you now. Brat, growled Orochimaru. You really think you can kill me? You're delusional. I'm not, was Naruto's straightforward reply. He made a single hand sign with a single motion. Slash. 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 The wind sliced sharply, and that was the only sound that came next. After blinking, Orochimaru stumbled. His body fell apart a heartbeat later, neatly sliced into dozens of tiny cubes that held their shape perfectly. Quiet. Everyone was stunned and stood motionless. It broke. The Edo Tensei. Tobiramas and Hashiramas took charge of their own lives. Incredulous, the Anbu stood outside the barrier. As their master lay in pieces, Orochimaru's barrier team gaped in shock, their jutsu stuttering. Still in shock, Hiruzen said, Wait, Naruto, how did you even get inside the barrier? Naruto gave him a quick look. Does it matter? The snake is dead. Be glad. He won't cause any more pain, or torment anyone else. Hiruzen was unable to respond. Naruto. He was stopped by a voice. Minato. Naruto pivoted. With regret and guilt etched on his face, Minato took a step forward. Can you come back, please? We can be a family again. I know I failed you. I'm so sorry. I promise I'll change. A thick silence fell. Naruto gave a headshake. No, I have things to do. People who need me. I won't turn my back on them. Please, Naruto, made Minato beg. I know, you don't owe us anything. But at least come for your mother. She's not herself since you left. Naruto remained silent for a while. Then he spoke slowly. I'll ask you one question, he addressed them. Answer it honestly. Lie to me, and you'll have a grave next to Orochimaru. Minato gave a shaky nod. Naruto said in a pained voice, Why did you treat me like that? Why did you hate me? Why did you swap my grades with that fool? Why didn't you once ask how I was doing? Minato opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Unable to look his son in the eye, he stood silent and ashamed. As though the silence was sufficient, Naruto closed his eyes. Silently, you don't have one, he said. So don't bother me again. He signaled his team by raising his hand and directing chakra into the seal engraved on his palm. Naruto turned and walked away without saying anything more. After that, he vanished. Dust, silence, and the weight of all that was unsaid were left behind. The invasion was over, but the smoke from the fight was still in the air. News of Orochimaru's death swept through the village like wildfire. The unimaginable had occurred. Naruto stood tall from the rooftop, his eyes burning with a quiet intensity, his cloak billowing in the wind. He had just returned from dealing one of the fabled Sannin a deadly blow. The hidden leaf was swept with shock. Nobody had anticipated it this way. Kabuto Yakushi suddenly materialized, facing Naruto with a furious expression on his face. His voice quivered with rage as he demanded, You killed Orochimaru-sama. Naruto's eyes were calculating and icy. He said, yes, without hesitation. He was a hindrance to my plans. Now you have a choice. Join me, or die. Kabuto's gaze grew strained. He spat, why would I ever join you? Orochimaru is dead, declared Naruto harshly. What will you do now? You won't survive in this village. Everyone knows your betrayal. You're a walking corpse unless you switch sides. Kabuto refused to back down. My loyalty lies with Orochimaru-sama, even in death. The bodies of Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro were carried by the rookie genin, Shikamaru, Mito, Menma, and others, as they arrived at the Chunin exam arena. They had sorrow in their eyes. Baki, the sensei of the Sand siblings, and a number of Sand shinobi who had been captured were sitting tied up. The remaining Sound and Sand forces that had invaded were dead. When Kakashi saw the dead Kazakage children, he came forward, his eyes filled with fear. He questioned, You killed them? No, Mito said gravely. Naruto did. Kakashi gasped in surprise. Naruto is here. Yes, Shikamaru replied. He killed the three, without even breaking a sweat. Orochimaru is dead, a breathless Junin said as he fell from the rooftop before Kakashi could react. Killed by Naruto. The news came as a flash. What? Menma exclaimed. Orochimaru is a Sannin. How? Kakashi immediately hurried to the rooftop with the genin to verify it. Minato was standing atop the tower, with Jiraiya and Hiruzen at his sides. Their expressions were somber, each displaying a mixture of surprise, grief, and reflection. Dad! Exclaimed Menma and Mito. Minato slowly turned to face them, sorrow shadowing his eyes. Kakashi took a step forward. Did Naruto really kill Orochimaru? Yes, Hiruzen muttered. He used a technique I've never seen before. It was as if nothing had happened, but then, moments later, Orochimaru collapsed, cut into pieces. They all turned to face the rooftop, where remnants and some flesh were still visible. With a low voice, Sasuke questioned, Wait, is that Orochimaru? Hiruzen nodded silently. There was no denying the truth. Naruto had evolved. Furthermore, the world was unaware of what was about to happen. Naruto remained motionless, staring at Kabuto, who was furious. Almost disappointed, Naruto asked calmly, You really don't want to live, do you? As chakra surged violently around him, Kabuto roared, You think you can kill my master and walk away unharmed? Anger blazed in his eyes. Naruto did not recoil. I killed your master before he even realized he was dying. What makes you think you can do better? Without waiting, Kabuto charged forward, aiming for Naruto's vitals with chakra scalpels ignited in both hands. However, he abruptly stopped in the middle of his stride, frozen. Then Kabuto fell silently to the ground. Dead, Zabuza, Haku, and Naruto's genin team came up out of the shadows as the wind blew away the last remnants of the battle. Naruto said, It's done, and turned to face them. We're leaving. Haku whispered, But, what about the exams? And promotions? Naruto let out a sigh. Forget them. You can take the exams again in 6 months. If not for the invasion, you all would have made Chunin. But that snake bastard ruined everything. They turned away from Konoha and disappeared into the distance without saying anything more. After a few days, Konoha. They were rebuilding. Because Orochimaru had died quickly, the village had escaped the worst. There were fewer fatalities, fewer injuries, and the damage was being repaired fast. After spending the day assisting with recovery efforts, the rookie genin gathered at Akamichi restaurant for a brief moment of peace, comforted by the familiarity of food and companions. With wide, disbelieving eyes, Ino appeared stunned. Wait, you're serious? Naruto really killed the Sand siblings, and Orochimaru? Shikamaru sighed wearily and leaned back. Troublesome, I've already said it twice. Are you deaf or just annoying today? But how? Kiba inquired, perplexed. I mean, maybe I believe he beat the Sand siblings, but Orochimaru. He's a Sannin, one of the strongest shinobi alive. Choji said, Don't ask me, in between mouthfuls. We saw what was left on the roof. Kiba leaned closer. What do you mean, what was left? His corpse, stated Shikamaru bluntly. The third Hokage said Naruto used a jutsu none of them had ever seen. One moment, Orochimaru was fine. The next, he just fell apart. Dead. Over the table, there was silence. It was only now that the gravity of what had transpired began to sink in. Nobody knew what Naruto's transformation meant for the future. Konoha in the council room. The only sounds in the quiet of the Hokage's office were the rustle of papers and the distant cries of shinobi outside who were engaged in reconstruction work. Even though Konoha had just escaped an invasion, neither the political nor the emotional fallout had been resolved. Danzo Shimura stood in the middle of the room, his tone as sharp as a kunai and his face unreadable. So you're telling me, your son, the boy who left the village, killed Orochimaru and the Casecage's children? The yellow flash, Minato Namikaze, did not recoil. With a silent blaze in his eyes, he answered, yes. We were there when he killed Orochimaru. With worry in every crease of her face, Kaharu Udatane leaned forward. Do you realize the political consequences this might cause? Minato's eyebrows went up. What consequences? He killed the children of a cage, she yelled. Do you think Suna will just let that go? As he measured his words, the fourth Hokage exhaled slowly. Have you all forgotten what war means? Casualties are inevitable, and let me remind you, Orochimaru tricked them. He murdered the Casecage months ago and manipulated Suna into this invasion. Their forces are crippled, their leadership is gone, they won't risk another war now. I just hope their council isn't foolish enough to act blindly. With his customary slouch against the wall, Shikaku Nara raised his voice in a low, reflective tone. What a drag, honestly, if it weren't for Naruto, the casualties on our side would have been far worse. That jutsu he used to kill Orochimaru, no one's ever seen anything like it. Danzo squinted his eyes. That's exactly why we need to bring him back. He's a Konoha shinobi. We cannot allow someone of his power to remain rogue. What if he allies with another nation? Turns that power against us. And that technique, we must study it. Understand it. He was a mere genin, and yet he's producing students who fight like Chunin in a matter of months. Do you understand how far behind we've fallen? Homura Mitokado gave a solemn nod. Yes, there are reports. He's built a village, called it Ryomen. He's hired Momochi Zabuza, and it's said, he killed Yagura, the Mizukage. Helped Materumi end the civil war in the water country. Like a stone, the weight of those words descended upon the room. With a more insistent tone, Danzo moved closer to the table. You see, this is exactly what I've been saying. We must bring him back. Finally, however, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, spoke in a composed yet worn-out voice, aged not only by years but also by the strain of too many conflicts. That won't be possible, he made it clear, he wants nothing more to do with this village. And frankly, we should be grateful he didn't side with Orochimaru during the invasion. That jutsu he used, if he had turned it on Konoha, the village wouldn't be standing. And he wasn't even tired. He looked like he could keep going all day. He took a moment to process that fact. Our priority now is rebuilding. We must show the other nations that Konoha is still strong, still stable, even after this. Our security must be tightened. Our front must be united. That boy, he's out there, yes. But for now, he is not our enemy. Sharp as steel, Danzo's voice faded to a whisper. So you're saying we just let that boy go, on his own? Hiruzen nodded solemnly after closing his eyes for a while. For now, yes. Danzo leaned forward, his voice piercing with accusation, his eyes hardening. Did you forget, he's a rogue shinobi now. We should officially label him as missing nin. With a measured yet firm voice, Hiruzen slowly shook his head. No. He officially left Konoha months ago. It seems he planned it well. Jiraiya came forward with a bunch of papers. His papers were spread out in front of the council. These are his papers, he said. Proof that he resigned from the village formally. Danzo sneered, clearly frustrated. Somebody's foolishness cost us a potential shinobi. I've heard whispers, this boy isn't just a prodigy. He's a prodigy of prodigies. He's even surpassing Itachi Uchiha. Minato's eyes glowed with rage, but he spoke calmly, preferring to remain silent rather than engage in conflict. The tense silence was finally broken by Inoichi Yamanaka, who was cautious but looking for clarification. So, we just leave him by himself? Reluctant acceptance was evident in Minato's voice. Yes, we don't have any other choice. If anyone has suggestions, speak now, but they can't bring us more problems. There was a heavy silence in the room. A village concealed in the Sand Council room. The tension in Sunagaku's council chamber was oppressive. Outside, the desert winds howled in mourning for the dead. At first, nobody said anything. The quiet itself served as a memorial, a somber admission of their passing. However, grief quickly gave way to anger, which was followed by fear. A council member clenched fists on the table and muttered bitterly, "We were deceived. That bastard Orochimaru killed the Cage. Temari, Kankuro, even Gaara, they're all dead. The One Tail is gone. We've lost not only our leaders, but our legacy. We're now the weakest of the 5 great nations." The words were unavoidable, indisputable, and fell like sand through open fingers. One of the senior advisors, Ebi, closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. We fell into his trap, and now we must face the consequences. Another voice rose, piercing and angry. We shouldn't let this slide. The air was pierced by a chilly glare. Chio curtly said, "I advise you to keep your mouth shut." There was no argument in her tone. She was as sharp as any blade, even at her advanced age. Grimly, Ebi nodded. For now, Baki will serve as the acting Cage. Despite the weight of what had happened, Baki stood tall and nodded solemnly to accept the responsibility. Our forces are weakened. With the Cage's death now known across the nations, we may face an invasion. We must regroup, rebuild. Ebi cautiously added, we should think about forming an alliance with the Hidden Leaf. Have you lost your mind? Yelled another council member. The Leaf is the reason we lost everything. Don't forget, if not for them, the Cage would still live. No, Baki interrupted in a steady voice. It wasn't Konoha. The attack came from someone else. Again, there was silence. It was the leader of a newly formed village, wrote Baki. A boy, Naruto, the son of the 4th Hokage. He renounced his family name only a few months ago. He's the one who trained a group of Genin into Chunin-level fighters in weeks. I can't even imagine what kind of training regimen he put them through. He took a moment to allow the shock to sink in. And he didn't come alone. Zabuza Momochi fights beside him. The room became silent. Up until now, rumors of a new power emerging in the shadows of the great nations had been written off. In addition to losing its Cage, Sunagakur now had to contend with the emergence of an uncontrollable force. The Sand's legacy was in ruins. Secret root chambers in leaves. In the chilly, dreary hallways of the Root Anbu base, beneath the serene surface of Konoha, shadows stirred. With one arm behind his back and the other covered in thick bandages, Danzo Shimura stood motionless in the gloomy light, secrets hidden beneath flesh. Though his lone eye was closed, his thoughts were racing. Thus, he murdered Orochimaru. As simple as that. I will soon have you under my control, Naruto Namikaze. No, the boy who disregarded even his name. His eye opened. A few feet away, a Root Anbu agent crouched, feeling the storm that lay behind Danzo's composure. The masked agent said, Danzo-sama, in a cool, measured voice. How are you planning to bring him in? From the latest intelligence, he has his own village now. He's not a boy we can simply call back. The words were ice, but Danzo's lips hardly moved. We will destroy it. A moment of stunned silence. That will surely break him, the Root agent said, a little reluctantly. But what if he retaliates? According to the reports, he himself is a one-man army. Some say he surpassed even the 4th Hokage. Danzo's one eye narrowed as he slowly turned. Which is why we must plan this carefully. Every weakness must be identified. Every threat, neutralized before it breathes. His cane tapping softly on the metal floor, he took a step forward. He may be powerful, but he is still young. Driven by emotion, idealistic. That is where we will strike. The agent said nothing, but his body language conveyed uneasiness. According to the reports he had read, Naruto had defeated Orochimaru. The speed at which he was training others was abnormal. Zabuza Momochi was now standing by his side, faithful. Danzo's voice became barely audible. Break the village, sever his ties, turn him against the world. Then, offer him salvation. Beneath the wrinkles on the elder's face, a thin smile curled. Konoha will be the only thing left for him to cling to. Thus, the seed of treachery was planted. Beneath the Leaf Village, a new war was starting, one that would be fought with the chains of control and the shadows of ambition rather than kunai or chakra. Alongside Jiraiya, Gai Tanzaku, a vibrant, chaotic town tucked away from Konoha's orderly tranquility. It was a sanctuary for drunks, gamblers, and people who didn't want to be discovered. It had taken days of tracking for Jiraiya of the Sannin, who had hidden his chakra signature so well that not even Tsunade, who was extremely perceptive, would notice. This time, he couldn't let her go. He walked through the congested streets now, scanning bars, gambling establishments, and any location that smelled of sake and desperation under the gentle glow of evening lanterns. Finally, he located her. Tsunade Senju, the Slug Princess, renowned healer, and notoriously bad gambler, was sitting at a low table with Shizune by her side, holding a bottle of sake. Jiraiya stepped into the light and said, "Hello, Tsunade. Long time no see," with a roguish grin. Tsunade's face hardly changed. "Jiraiya, what are you doing here? And how did you even find me?" Jiraiya pretended to be innocent as she asked, "What, is it wrong for an old teammate to drop in?" Tsunade's eyes narrowed. "Cut the crap, why are you here?" Jiraiya's voice became solemn. "Orochimaru invaded Konoha a few days ago." She stopped and slowly raised her cup. "Yeah, I heard. So what?" "He used a forbidden jutsu, created by the Nadaime. Reanimated the Shodai and Nadaime Hokage. Controlled them. Turned them against the village." Tsunade gripped the cup more tightly. Her expression darkened. "What happened to them?" "Orochimaru's dead." Tsunade choked on her sake as soon as he said it, splattering it all over the table. Shizune appeared to have been slapped across the face as well. Tsunade, who was still coughing, exclaimed, "What? Who? Was it Minato?" Jiraiya slowly shook his head. "No, it was Naruto." Like a thunderclap, the name lingered in the air. Tsunade blinked. "Are you joking? You expect me to believe that?" "It's true, Sensei." Hiruzen was about to use the dead demon-consuming seal. But before he could finish, Naruto appeared. Jiraiya hesitated, recalling the bizarre incident. He didn't even move. He used a technique none of us had ever seen before. In the blink of an eye, Orochimaru was sliced to pieces. It wasn't even a fight. Tsunade gazed at him as realization gradually shattered her incredulity. "What kind of technique does that?" "I don't know," Jiraiya said. "But there's more. A few months ago, he officially renounced the Uzumaki and Namikaze names. Then he disappeared." Shizune scowled. "Where did he go?" "He formed a new village. Named it Ryomen." Tsunade dropped her sake bottle with a loud crack. She raised her voice and said, "A kid, Naruto, made his own village. Why would he leave Konoha? His family, everything." "I don't have all the answers," Jiraiya declared, losing all of his customary humor. "But I do know this. He sent genin from Ryomen to the Chunin exams. They were easily Chunin level, and none of them are even 14 yet." Stunned, Tsunade sat back. The world was changing quickly. Jiraiya gave her a direct look. Tsunade was forgotten as she sat in stunned silence with sake dripping from her fingers. Beyond the tiny tavern, the clamor of Tanzaku Gai's vibrant nightlife persisted, but in the silent booth where two of the legendary Sannin sat, the atmosphere was heavy with something other than sorrow. With one arm draped over the back of the bench, Jiraiya leaned back against the wall and spoke quietly. "And if you're wondering why he left the village and his family, you can blame Minato." Tsunade turned slowly in his direction and blinked. "What?" Jiraiya gave a nod. "From what I've heard, his sister Mito told me Minato treated Naruto like he was unwanted. Neglected him, even resented him, at times. He gave all his attention to the Jinchuriki siblings instead." Jiraiya remarked, "Mito, the girl, has potential. She's a capable shinobi, works hard, doesn't complain. But the other one, Menma, he's a waste of talent. No discipline, no drive. Couldn't pass the academy on merit if his life depended on it. His taijutsu's weak, chakra control's worse. I trained him personally for a month just to see if he had anything, barely improved." For a brief moment, the typical smile vanished from his face as he met Tsunade's gaze. "But Naruto, that boy's a monster of a prodigy. The kind we haven't seen in generations. Minato, he messed up. Big time." Tsunade rubbed her temples and sighed. "But what about Kushina? She's his mother. She should have cared, at least." Jiraiya lowered her voice. "She didn't hate him, but she didn't care either. Not really. She was too wrapped up in the other two. Especially Menma." Anger boiled beneath Tsunade's skin as she clenched her fists. What the hell is happening in Konoha? What's the point of being a parent, or a Hokage, if you let your own son be treated like that? And that's not even the worst part, Jiraiya went on to say. For years, most of the village treated Naruto like he was the Nine Tails. Like he was the demon itself, not its jailer. Fear, hatred, whispered insults, stares that could kill. There was a sharp crack as Tsunade's hand broke the ceramic sake cup she was holding. "What?" How can Minato and Kushina be so blind? Jiraiya said. Easy, Tsunade, while looking around. Some customers were already glancing in their direction. You're drawing attention. Tsunade sat back, letting out a trembling breath. So, why are you telling me all this now? I intend to meet him, Jiraiya muttered. He caught Tsunade's attention. To what? Convince him to come back. Did the council send you? No, Jiraiya firmly stated. I'm going on my own. I need to know if he's a threat or not. No one knows what he's really doing out there. He's quiet, too quiet, and if he really has the power to kill Orochimaru without lifting a finger, then he's not just a missing nin. For the first time in years, she could see real concern in his eyes as he looked directly into hers. If he's building something dangerous, if he's another Orochimaru, or worse, another Akatsuki, then we can't ignore it. If we do, it might be the end of the world. Uneasy, Tsunade scowled. And if he is a threat? What then? You said it yourself. He's probably the strongest shinobi alive right now. What are you going to do about it? Jiraiya took a moment to respond. We'll worry about that later. Tsunade heard it right away. You're including me in this. What makes you think I'll go along with it? Jiraiya gave a small smile. Don't you want to see your godson again? See the village he's building with his own hands. Tsunade remained silent. She didn't say no, though. Jiraiya's tone was unusually serious as he asked, so, will you tag along? Tsunade took a moment to respond. With thoughts of a boy she hardly knew but was bound to by blood, fate, and old vows, her gaze strayed to the empty sake cup in front of her. She paused for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, I'll come. But do you even know where he is? You said it's a newly formed village. Jiraiya said, yeah, and nodded. I dug up some intel. It's positioned just beyond the land of waves, straddling the borders of the water and fire countries. Smart location, isolated, but close to trade routes. Tsunade was already rolling her shoulders as she stood up. Then we move at dawn. It's already late. Their journey started the following morning. They arrived at the outskirts of the village, Ryomen, after a week of travel. They traveled through hazy coastlines, dense forests, and strange settlements that were not yet noted on shinobi maps. And the village wasn't what they had anticipated when they got there. Basic structures. Sites of ongoing construction. Young shinobi sparring in open courtyards with bustling civilians. A place of purpose rather than grandeur. 2 guards, wearing light gray and black uniforms with simple red insignias, stepped forward as they stood in front of a low-key gate. State your business, a guard said bluntly. Jiraiya's eyebrow went up. What? Don't you know who we are? We're the legendary Sannin. The guard remained motionless. You may be legendary, but in Ryomen, no one is above another. Everyone is treated equally, without title or reputation. So again, state your business. Or leave. Tsunade blinked. It already feels different here. Jiraiya raised both hands languidly and sighed. All right, we're here to meet Naruto. For what reason? I'm his godfather. She's his godmother. After a brief pause, the guard nodded. Wait here. The sound of hammers and footsteps reverberated through the surrounding construction sites, breaking the momentary silence. A few minutes later, a young boy, no more than 11, came toward them with a composed yet deferential look. Come with me. Naruto-sama has granted permission to meet. Jiraiya gave his head a scratch. Wait a minute, didn't the gate guard say everyone here's equal? What's with the sama? The boy gave a firm nod. Yes, that's true, but our respect for Naruto-sama comes from what he's done for us, not a title. Tsunade's head cocked. What did he do for you, exactly? Whispering, I was an orphan, the boy walked in front of them. My family was killed during a raid years ago. I survived, but I was living on scraps. Alone. A few months ago, Naruto-sama found me. He gave me food, a home, and, most importantly, purpose. He trained me himself. He does that for all of us. Tsunade and Jiraiya did not immediately reply. They observed the sights as they went. Villagers working side by side, shinobi and civilians constructing houses, cultivating crops, and supporting one another without regard to rank. There was only concentrated cooperation, no jonin strutting around our clan banners. The boy eventually guided them to a modest 2-story structure, wood on the outside. Not a guard, no opulence. Tsunade's eyes narrowed as she asked, this is it? Yes, said the boy. This is where Naruto-sama stays. It's nothing fancy. He says if we're all equal, he should live no differently than us. Jiraiya whistled quietly. That kid really is something else. Tsunade said nothing. As they got closer to the door, her heart began to race. He had a chakra that she could sense. Large, serene, and oddly soft, yet akin to a volcano. A village of purpose, equality, and peculiar order. Nobody shielded the boy, but he now shielded others. She had never met the godson. Preparing to open the door. The visitors were greeted by an odd sight as the door creaked open. 5 identical copies of Naruto, each occupied with a different task. Surrounded by scrolls and blueprints, a man who looked exactly like the architect was having a lengthy conversation with 2 clones. A different Naruto was going through financial records, handling money with a ferocity that betrayed his concentration. A 4th was going over old scrolls and classifying them according to their subject matter, such as combat theory, training, and sealing. Additionally, the original Naruto sat quietly in a chair in the middle of the room, arms folded, and watched them steadily. Naruto spoke first without getting up, his voice calm and reserved. So, what are you doing here? Or did your precious Hokage send you? Jiraiya shook his head, attempting to diffuse the situation with a small smile. No, I came of my own accord. I wanted to meet you. Naruto remained motionless. So, what do you want to know? With narrowed eyes, Tsunade took a step forward. What made you decide to build a village of your own? A small, sour grin appeared on Naruto's face. Konoha, he said, that's what made me think of it. Tsunade appeared perplexed. What does that mean? If you'd ever truly lived in the village, not from the Hokage's seat but with its people, you'd understand, said Naruto. To put it simply, it's rotten from the inside. Favoritism is everywhere. They preach teamwork and loyalty, say we should never abandon a mission or our comrades. But when the time comes, they do the opposite. His tone became stern. The council is the worst. Corrupt, power-hungry. They talk about what's best for the village, but all they want is control to wage war, to use shinobi-like tools. Tsunade scowled more deeply. What are you talking about, Naruto? Who exactly are you blaming? Jiraiya spoke in a hushed, cautious tone. Is it Danzo? But what does he have to do with any of this? Slowly, Naruto nodded. Yes, it's Danzo. Think about it. How did Orochimaru infiltrate Konoha during the Chunin exams? The village is surrounded by barrier seals. It wasn't just an oversight, it was treachery. Jiraiya's gaze grew piercing. You're saying Danzo helped Orochimaru? Naruto stated. He sided with him, in a tone that was both disgusted and certain. He wanted the Hokage dead. With Hokage gone, Danzo believed he could seize power and become Hokage. Tsunade's tone became firm as she crossed her arms. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? Naruto didn't say anything in response. He took a scroll from inside his cloak and placed it on the table. Its contents glowed dimly as he opened it. Quietly, he handed it to them. Tsunade and Jiraiya's expressions darkened with every line as they perused the documents. Danzo had undoubtedly conspired with Orochimaru. The details were terrifying. Meeting logs hidden in coded archives, troop movements denied, and route orders not carried out. At last, Jiraiya spoke in a strained tone. Where did you get this? Orochimaru's hidden base, answered Naruto. After I killed him, we raided every lab he had. Most of them were filled with inhuman experiments, but we also found this. He'd been planning this invasion for years. Danzo didn't just know, he helped. That's why Root didn't show up when the village was under attack. Jiraiya attempted to object, but Root was disbanded. Hiruzen gave that order himself. Naruto shot him a glance that pierced the elderly man's barriers. You really believe Danzo would follow that order? There was a long pause, and then Jiraiya let out a sigh. All right, it seems he didn't. There's more, said Naruto. Orochimaru's research was focused on 2 things, awakening the Rinnegan and using Hashirama's cells. He experimented on dozens, maybe hundreds of test subjects. Only 2 were successful, Tenzo and Danzo. Both gained access to wood release. Tsunade appeared astonished. Danzo had wood release. Naruto gave a nod. He did. Orochimaru tried to harness it for himself but failed. He also pursued immortality, obsessively. But that dream's a waste. Jiraiya's eyebrow went up. Why do you say that? Naruto's voice became quieter as he questioned, what good is immortality if you're alone? Even someone like Orochimaru, he wasn't immune to loneliness. He leaned forward a little, his body barely able to control its tension. And then there's the cursed seal. He created a new version, stronger, more invasive. He planned to use it on Sasuke, take over his body. But Sasuke was more talented than he expected. He barely avoided being consumed by it. In a solemn tone, Tsunade posed the last query. And what did you do with all of this? I brought the jutsu here. We'll study and train with what's useful. Everything else, his research, his methods, the cursed seal, I burned it all to ash. Naruto's voice was low and controlled, and his face hardened, but it was clear that he was furious. And since we're being honest, he said, let me tell you what really made me leave the village and build my own. He looked at each of them individually, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune, and his tone was cold as he went on. You can blame it on my so-called family. To them, only Mito and Menma mattered. Why? Because they're Jinchuriki. Because they're special. Like poison, he spat out the word. That fool of a father, Minato, hated me with vigor. And Menma, that brat always accused me of using some secret scrolls to train, like I was cheating just for trying to get stronger. And what did Minato do? He believed it, every single time. With a slight forward lean, Naruto spoke in a bitter tone. Every time Menma cried or threw a tantrum, Minato would hit me, no questions asked. And the worst thing, he swapped my grades. Uncertain, Jiraiya's brow furrowed. Swapped your grades. With a slow nod, Naruto contained but did not dull the rage in his eyes. I didn't get it at first. I trained harder than anyone, studied, pushed myself. But somehow, I kept barely passing. Later, I found out, Minato switched my scores with Menma's. So that Golden Boy could shine, and I'd be the failure. After that, I stopped trying. I wrote my exams just well enough to scrape through. But Minato still beat me for getting low marks, while Menma, who failed everything, was coddled like a baby. Jiraiya stayed silent, obviously frightened. Tsunade parted her lips, then shut them again. At last, what about Mito? And Kushina? Jiraiya inquired. Naruto let out a hollow, sour laugh. They're just shadows, wrapped up in their perfect little world with Menma. Neither of them ever asked how I was doing. And here's something you probably don't know, we were on the same genin team. All three were taken aback by this. My Jonin sensei was Kushina, my own mother. But during training, she'd call Menma and Mito, take them somewhere to train privately, and leave me standing there like an outsider. Tsunade scowled. Did you show up late to team meetings? Naruto gazed at her, unable to believe her. Seriously, no, we all arrived on time. She just chose to take them. Never told me what to do. Never even looked at me. A sigh escaped his lips as he leaned back. But I didn't bother asking. I was used to it. I trained on my own. Just like I always had, before the academy, during it, and after. On one mission, she even abandoned the objective because her children weren't ready. That disgusted me. I snapped. I told her exactly what I thought, about how I was treated. Tsunade's voice became quieter as she asked, and then. She begged for forgiveness, said she wanted to make things right. But I didn't believe her, Naruto blunted. Jiraiya scowled. Why? If she was feeling guilt and trying to fix things. Naruto interrupted him. Let's say I hadn't snapped that day. Nothing would have changed. She'd still ignore me. Menma would still steal credit for what I did. Minato would still play dirty, like he always does. His tone darkened. He would robbed my promotion. Gave it to Menma. Said I lacked strategic thinking, even though I completed the mission perfectly. Menma nearly screwed it up, but guess who got the praise? Naruto gave a headshake. I snapped in front of Kakashi, Sakura, Sasuke, and the mission clients. I did it there for a reason. Because if I had said anything behind closed doors, they would have denied everything. Pretended like nothing happened. Protected the image. The lie. He raised his head, his eyes piercing and unblinking. So tell me, why should I endure that? Why should I let them hold me back? Why should I let people who hate me decide my future? Then there was silence. Heavy, suffocating. Shizune, Tsunade, and Jiraiya were silent. They knew in their hearts that there was no excuse, no justification, and the long-ignored pain of Naruto was finally revealed. The silence was broken first by Jiraiya, who rubbed the back of his neck with a weary hand. What he said about Menma, it's true, he grudgingly acknowledged. I never wanted to believe it, but now I'm not sure how he even passed the academy. His chakra control is a disaster, and he can't last 5 minutes in a proper fight without panting like he's run a mile. He took a quick look at Naruto before turning back to the others. I trained him for a month before the Chunin exams. He improved, slightly, but nothing close to what he needed. I thought he just needed more time. But now, I get it. Minato played dirty. The weight of it was heavy, and he sighed deeply. I don't know what went wrong. Minato wasn't like this. Back when we were young, when he was a jonin, he was fair. Kind. He didn't play favorites, not even during missions. Maybe the power got to him. Naruto made a snap decision. His response was composed but savage. No, the power didn't change him, it just brought out his true self. Tsunade, who had been silent for some time, squinted and changed the subject, possibly in an attempt to refocus her attention on something more realistic. Then tell me this, how did you get the money for all this? The land, the infrastructure, your people. Naruto gave a small smile. I own my own company. It operates across all the elemental nations. Even Jiraiya was taken aback by that. You own a company. Naruto gave a nod. Yes, Ryomen Industries. Maybe you've heard of it. Tsunade scowled. How did you build something that fast? In such a short time? Naruto posed a question of his own rather than providing a direct response. You remember Gato? Jiraiya's expression grew gloomy. Yeah, Gato was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the elemental nations. He had his hands in everything: shipping, smuggling, black markets, drugs, weapons, even human trafficking. A complete scumbag. Naruto's eyes became stony. He also controlled Wave Country. Monopolized it through fear and bribery. We were sent on a mission there. Kakashi and Kushina didn't care about what Gato was doing behind the scenes. As long as the mission was complete, they turned a blind eye. He bent over, but I didn't. After we completed the mission, I went back. I hunted Gato down myself. I killed him, dismantled his network, seized everything he owned, and I rebuilt it under a new name. Ryomen Industries. Shocked, Jiraiya blinked. You took over Gato's entire empire. I purified it, said Naruto. Turned it into a legitimate enterprise. I kept the shipping lines, the trade connections, and the infrastructure. But I tore down everything illegal, freed the people he exploited, erased his name, and built something better. That became the foundation of my village, and the economy that sustains it. Jiraiya and Tsunade looked at each other. Neither one said anything. With a fire burning silently in his eyes, Naruto leaned back. I may not have had their support, or their guidance, but I had my own will, my own strength, and I swore I would never let anyone chain me down again. Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune finally got ready to depart after spending a few days in Ryomen village, taking in everything Naruto had constructed. They observed the village's order, stability, and the subdued reverence Naruto enjoyed from its residents during their visit. Naruto crossed his arms and smirked dryly as they stood by the village gates, prepared to leave. So, are you going to run back and tell your precious Minato everything? Jiraiya gave a headshake. No, I'm not. Tsunade took a step forward, her face tough but not mean. I hope you know what you're doing, Naruto. Just don't go looking for trouble. Naruto gave a single nod. I'll be fine. Take care of yourselves. The three then turned and departed, with Ryomen's gates closing behind them. A few weeks later, Root Base, Konoha. Danzo stood in front of a line of elite Anbu operatives, masked, silent, and willing to follow orders without question, in the chilly, dim hallways of Root headquarters, beneath the surface of Konoha. Danzo said, Ryomen has grown too bold, in a low, emotionless voice. Naruto must be brought under control. His influence is spreading, and that poses a threat to the balance of power. He paced slowly in front of the group that had gathered. U-50 will strike the village. Destroy what he has built. Kill the weak. Make an example of them. But do not touch Naruto. He is mine to handle. With silent agreement, the Root Anbu bowed. The unit left the village that night, making its way with surgical precision through mountain trails and forests. They traveled for several days before coming close to Ryomen's territory, where they camped in the nearby woods and hid from patrols. They bided their time, they watched, and they struck when they thought they had discovered a vulnerability. The raid's night, like a heavy blanket, darkness covered the land. The world was almost completely dark as the moon was smothered by clouds. The lanterns lining the outer walls of Ryomen village were the only source of light. Silent as ghosts, the root Anbu slipped through the darkness. There was no sound from their footsteps. They suppressed their chakra signatures. With their blades at the ready, they moved toward the gates, ready to breach and overrun the defenses with a quick, vicious blow. However, as they got closer to the edge, the earth glistened. An eerie glow illuminated faint chakra lines that resembled spiderwebs across the ground. One by one, hidden seals came to life in a ripple of light. A heartbeat later. Boom! A series of explosive tags concealed beneath the ground exploded. Chakra-infused roots exploded from the ground, striking out like living sentries, and trees around the forest edge literally moved. Sensor alarms sprang into action. Once abandoned towers roared with vitality and light. Shinobi, well-trained, well-armed, and unafraid, poured out from the village walls. Leading them were leaders of elite units, each emblazoned with the Ryoman insignia, a spiral flame with steel wings on either side. And Naruto was above them all, perched on a watchtower with a commanding view of the battlefield. Clad in sleek black armor with a deep crimson sash, he looked down at the assailants with a composed, unreadable expression. Around him, shadow clones appeared and began to move in order to set up defenses and stop the intruders. Naruto had anticipated their arrival. He was ready for this. Amid the usual deluge of cage work, Minato sat at his desk, surrounded by mission reports and scrolls. Things had gradually started to get back to normal ever since Suna and Otogaku's invasion. The village was still being rebuilt, and the residents were at last beginning to feel secure once more. Peace, however, was still a long way off for Minato. His mind kept returning to the Akatsuki and their hunt for the Biju, a much bigger threat. Even though Naruto had vanquished the three tails and one-tail Jinchuriki, those Biju might reappear. Although no one was certain, it might take years or even decades. Knowing that Akatsuki's plans had been temporarily derailed, Minato found some solace in that uncertainty. He was still plagued by the fear despite being both Hokage and the father of two Jinchuriki. He wasn't worried about Mito. With quiet strength, she bore the weight of being a Jinchuriki, trained diligently, and never complained. No, Menma was his true concern. Minato let out a sigh as his chest constricted with guilt. His childhood mistakes were now coming back to haunt him, hard and inevitable. He had altered the Academy's records, switching his grades with Naruto's, in an attempt to shield Menma. His goal had been to boost Menma's self-esteem. Instead, he had constructed a false, lie-based image of success. Even worse, in the process, he had rejected Naruto. That choice was now stinging him in the back. In the month preceding the Chunin exams, Jiraiya had just finished training Menma. It was what Minato had hoped would unlock his son's potential. Rather, Jiraiya gave him a report that was brutally honest. He picked up the parchment once more and read the handwriting, which was familiar and scribbled. Lazy. A complete sloth. Doesn't even try. Even after knowing the shadow clone training method and still hasn't improved his chakra control, stamina, or endurance. Honestly, an 8-year-old would do better. All he does is whine about how hard training is. I hate to say it, but it'd be better if he dropped out of the shinobi program. If he had even a fraction of motivation, I wouldn't have to write this. But he doesn't. I don't know what you did, Minato, but he acts like being the Hokage's son makes him untouchable. Mito, on the other hand, she works, she fights, she pushes herself. Menma doesn't even have a drop of her drive. Minato leaned back in his chair and closed the scroll. There it was, plain and simple, the truth. Menma lacked the will to improve in addition to his lack of skill. Minato had no one else to blame but himself because he was his father. Now he was thinking about his youngest son, Naruto, rather than Menma or the village. Sin was a far too small word to describe what he had done to Naruto. It may be referred to as a tragedy by some and a failure by others. Minato, however, perceived it as something more sinister, an abomination. A sickening and cruel injustice that was the result of carelessness and unthinking fear rather than malice. He had been blind to Naruto because he was so preoccupied with keeping the Jinchuriki safe from the Kyuubi's hatred. Even worse, he had come to despise his own son for no apparent reason. However, that wasn't the real cause. He knew it in his heart. Minato had been haunted by that one question ever since Naruto had stood in front of him that day. Why? He had yet to respond. He was unable to comprehend the reasons behind his treatment of Naruto. Was it terror? Did it involve guilt? Was his judgment distorted by the weight of the Hokage's mantle? And now he witnessed the repercussions. Orochimaru, of all people, had taught him that Naruto was a prodigy among prodigies, not just a strong guy. An even greater genius than Itachi Uchiha. Minato was completely sickened by that realization alone. It's out of shame, not envy. He had avoided that youngster. His own blood and flesh. He had never once stopped the village from hating Naruto, isolating him, and viewing him as nothing more than the Kyuubi's vessel. Never stepping in at all. Nevertheless, Naruto had ascended, without him. The stories had been told to Minato. How Karigakure's civil war was resolved by Naruto alone. How he defeated the Jinchuriki of the Three Tails, Yagura. How he had established his own village. The fact that Naruto had trained 6 genin to Chunin level in just 3 months, however, was what most startled him and frightened him in a way he was unable to articulate. What was the training he subjected them to? What sort of determination did he instill in them? The weight of it all crashed down on Minato, who leaned back in his chair and gripped the edge of his desk with his fingers. He had been wrong. A terrible, irreparable error. And now he understood. His son might have been lost forever. In the village, a girl with crimson red hair lay quietly on her bed, staring blankly at the ceiling with her eyes wide open. Pale shadows were cast throughout the room as the faint moonlight filtered through the curtains. Tears trickled silently down her cheeks and soaked into the pillow under her head. Her voice was shaking with grief as she muttered, "I'm sorry, lil bro. I'm so sorry." This was Mito, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki's second child. One name consumed her thoughts: Naruto. Her younger brother. She recalled every detail of his treatment and the fact that the very people he referred to as villagers hunted him down. She had witnessed everything. Menma had thrown a fit, accusing Naruto of deceit and manipulation, and she had seen their father raise his hand against Naruto. Still, she remained silent. She recalled how their mother ignored them, how Menma made fun of Naruto, harassed him, and used deceptive tactics to make him look bad, all in an attempt to get their father to hit him. Mito, too, had stood silently. It wasn't that she detested Naruto. Never due to that, she cherished him. However, she let him down. She didn't stand up for him. She was unable to console him. When the whole family abandoned him, she did not stand by his side. She never once told him that he was important. She made no attempt to protect him from the suffering. She saw him become more aloof and reclusive over the years. And even in that case, she didn't get in touch yet. He was gone now. He was no longer in the house. Departed from the village. Gave up the Namikaze moniker. He had made the decision to go it alone. And now, Mito's only option was in tears. She hoped that one day she would be able to express her regret to him. When it mattered, she spoke what she had never dared to say. Every time he spoke to her, she could see the change in him, the apathy in his voice, the coldness in his eyes. He no longer gave her a warm glance, only distance. Still, she wished, maybe, just maybe, she hoped, she would be given a chance by Naruto. An opportunity to express regret. An opportunity to put things right. A woman in her 30s with red hair sat by herself, holding a battered picture. It displayed pictures of her family from earlier times, when her kids were still small. One face in particular caught her attention, Naruto's. The guilt was intense. She had failed as an Uzumaki, not just as a mother. She had maintained the delusion that everything in her family was all right for years until Naruto finally lost it. He had always been the strong, independent one in her mind, the son who could manage without assistance. She believed that while Naruto would be perfectly content on his own, her oldest child required all of her care, attention, and nurturing. The truth was painfully clear to her now. Invulnerability did not equate to strength. If a strong child is ignored and invisible, they may still sustain injuries that nobody realizes until it's too late. Her heart was weighed down by shame. She had broken the sacred code of the Uzumaki, who were known to value family above all else. As a mother who failed to provide equal protection, guidance, and love, she had turned into the taint of the Uzumaki line. Another blonde stood in the Hokage's office, her face red, not from shame but from rage, her fists clenched. Menma was furious. He had recently finished reading Jiraiya's report. It presented him as lazy, uninspired, and unsuited to be a shinobi, the worst possible impression. Worst of all, he was likened to Naruto. Menma exclaimed, "I can't believe he wrote this. He's lying. He's just trying to make Naruto look better than me." The room echoed with the sound of a hard slap before he finished speaking. He had been struck by Minato. Menma stopped. His father had never struck him in his life. He'd never even raised his voice this high. He was stunned and about to lash out, but he was stopped cold after seeing his father's face. Anger was absent, only regret. A quiet, "I'm sorry," Minato said. Menma gave a blink. "Huh." With a sorrowful tone, Minato remarked, "If only I hadn't played favorites when you were younger, maybe you'd have grown up to be a better person." Menma frowned. "What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Jiraiya's lying. There's no way I'm unfit to be a shinobi." "Enough." The room was silenced as Minato's voice broke like thunder. He said icily, "Why don't we test that theory, then? You and me, right now, a spar." Menma appeared perplexed, but before he could say anything more, Minato added, "I taught you and Mito the Rasengan a few months ago. Show me." Menma's face lost its color. He paused. I haven't mastered it yet." Minato's face remained unchanged. "And yet Mito has. Why?" Unable to respond, Menma averted her gaze. "Forget it. Just come at me with everything you've got." Frustrated more than skilled, Menma snarled and sprang forward, kunai in hand. However, Minato made a simple move, sweeping his legs out from under Menma and slapping the kunai out of his grasp, sending him tumbling to the ground. Stunned, Menma lay there gazing at the ceiling. Minato gazed down at him, quietly disappointed rather than angry. "Look at yourself. I'm fighting you like an academy student, and you couldn't land a single hit," Minato said with a scowl. "And moreover, you're no longer a genin, you're back to being a civilian." Menma yelled angrily, "What? You can't do this to me. I'm your son." Minato answered, "Yet I did it, didn't I? I can't trust you to go on missions without endangering yourself or your teammates. You can't even defend yourself. If this spar had been a real fight, you'd be dead by now." Menma screamed in desperation, "No way. Please, give me a chance, Dad. I'll prove myself. Don't do this to me." Firmly, "Then train," Minato said. "Show me that Jiraiya-sensei is wrong. You have 1 month. If I don't see improvement by then, say goodbye to your career as a shinobi." With his cloak following him, he turned and left. Menma lay on the ground, alone, silent, and humiliated. Now, the weight of the recent events weighed heavily on Minato's shoulders as he sat in silence, deep in thought. His thoughts drifted to Jiraiya's report, Naruto's icy gaze, and how Menma had stumbled so easily during their fight. Like a curse he couldn't shake, every memory and every error kept repeating itself. Then, bang, the Hokage's office doors slammed open so violently that the papers on his desk were flung into the air and spilled all over the floor. Minato looked up, startled, and jolted out of his reverie. Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizune stood in the doorway, Shizune holding Taunton. However, Tsunade's expression worried him more than the numbers did. She had fiery eyes, she balled her fists, her body shook with rage. Minato was all too familiar with that appearance. She was enraged. She had probably just discovered the full extent of what he had done to Naruto, based on the look she gave Jiraiya. Minato also became aware that she was angry with him. He instantly sat up straight in his chair. Minato said, "Anbu, leave us, now." Silently, the masked shinobi obeyed, disappearing in a whirl of flickering shadows from the office. With a swift seal, Minato lifted his hand. A silencing seal pulsed in the air, a glowing ring of chakra. What was about to be said would not be heard by anyone outside this room. Getting out of his chair, he walked around the desk and stood in front of it, facing them. Jiraiya and Tsunade moved forward. Shizune trailed closely behind, silent but tense. His eyes met those of Tsunade. "So you already know why I'm here. You prepare yourself like a man expecting to be punched," she said in an angry tone. Minato didn't avert her gaze. He was unable to. When he said, "I have no excuse for what I did," his voice was low. "What I did to Naruto, it's beyond a sin. It's an abomination, a stain I can never wash away." Slowly but surely, Tsunade's fists unclenched. "As much as I wanted to pummel you through that wall," she stated sternly, "after seeing what Naruto's become, how far he's grown despite everything, I realized no punch I give you will hurt more than the reality you're already living with." Minato was silent and bowed his head in shame. Tsunade stepped forward and demanded, "Then tell me," now standing taller than him. Why the hell did you do it? Why did you treat your own son like that?" Minato whispered, "I don't know." Crack. Before anyone could react, Minato was flung backward into his desk by Tsunade's fist slamming into his face. Splinters flew across the room as the wooden frame broke under the impact. Jiraiya flinched. Shizune let out a gasp. Taunton even let out a squeal. Minato let out a groan and carefully dragged himself away from the debris, massaging the escalating bruise on his cheek from Tsunade's blow. Snarling, "Speak, now." With a shaky exhale, he leaned against the shattered remnants of the desk. I thought I needed to focus more on Menma and Mito, because they held the Kyuubi," he whispered quietly. "I thought that if I gave them all my attention, all my care, I could keep them from falling into the Kyuubi's hatred. I believed, stupidly, that pampering them would protect them." Then, regret clouding his eyes, he looked up at her. "But after everything that's happened, after seeing how Naruto turned out, and how Menma turned out, I realized that wasn't the reason. Not the whole reason." Embarrassed, he turned away once more. "The truth is, I don't know why I treated Naruto the way I did." With a sharp and impatient tone, Tsunade demanded, "Where is Kushina?" "She's at home," said Minato softly. There was pain and tiredness in his voice. "She hasn't been herself ever since Naruto left. She keeps saying she's a failure as an Uzumaki." Tsunade crossed her arms and sighed. "Fine, I'll deal with her later. For now, we have more pressing matters to discuss." Refocusing, Minato asked, "What kind of matters?" Jiraiya took several files and a scroll from his back and stepped forward. He handed them over with a grim expression. "These just came in," he said. Minato opened the scroll and started looking through the papers. His face tensed with every page, confusion turning to rage. He was about to turn to the final report when the silence was broken by a sudden flutter of wings. A messenger hawk perched on the ledge of the window. Minato went straight over to it and untied the little scroll that was fastened to its leg. The room froze when he broke the seal by channeling a trace of chakra through it. Several mutilated bodies dropped out as soon as the scroll opened, thudding sickeningly to the ground. Tun let out a terrified squeal. The uniforms on the bodies were immediately recognizable to Minato and the others as belonging to Root operatives. Minato reached for the letter affixed to the blood-stained scroll in stunned silence. As he unfolded it, his hand shook a little, and the red smears on the paper made it more difficult to read the words. Even the Hokage could be shaken to his very core by whatever message it held. The silence was broken by his voice. "It's from Naruto." He started reading out loud. "Hokage, I'm assuming you've seen my message already. I'm not sure if you were directly involved, but you've declared war on us by sending your ninjas to attack my village. I'll demonstrate what a true war is if that's what you want. You're not going to make it. Put your lackeys in their proper place, I say. I'm awaiting your response regarding the accountable party. Village of Ryomen." Minato's teeth clenched as he gripped the letter more tightly. His voice wavered between frustration and rage as he said, "Danzo. Damn that fool. I warned him not to cause any more trouble, but that fool never listens." His eyes narrowed as he turned to face Jiraiya. "And these files you handed me, where did you get them?" Jiraiya let out a deep breath, and his face darkened. Silently, "From Naruto," he said. Minato stopped. "What?" Jiraiya gave a somber nod. "We went to visit the village he's building. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. A place for outcasts. People betrayed by their clans, abandoned by their villages, and those who had nowhere left to go. Naruto's building something extraordinary there." He stopped, recalling what he had witnessed. "He doesn't act like a lord or a ruler. He lives among his people, works with them, trains them, eats with them. There are no titles, no hierarchy. Respect in that village isn't given, it's earned through actions. And from what we've seen, Naruto has earned it 100 times over." As Jiraiya went on, Tsunade listened in silence while her eyes hardened. After killing Orochimaru, Naruto and his team raided all of his hidden laboratories. They discovered his experiments and every one of his secret dealings, including those with Danzo. Jiraiya's voice became harsh. He found evidence of how Danzo desecrated the first Hokage's remains and harvested Uchiha Sharingan from those killed in the Third Ninja War. There were even records showing a deal with Orochimaru to eliminate both Yu and Sensei, so Danzo could take the Hokage's seat. Minato's eyes flickered with rage as his jaw tensed. And judging by the Root corpses that came with the letter, Jiraiya grumbled, "It looks like Danzo sent them to intimidate Naruto, maybe to force him to submit." But it backfired. Badly. As the implications set in, the room fell into a deep silence once more. What had begun as shards of fear and guilt was now growing into something far more dangerous, a storm spawned by truth, betrayal, and a long-forgotten child. Minato sounded, Anbu, over the tense atmosphere. In front of him, an Anbu agent landed and went to one knee. Lord Hokage. Minato gave a firm command, call for an emergency council meeting. With a nod, the Anbu disappeared in a flash of movement. Tsunade watched him intently with her arms crossed. She inquired, what are you planning to do? Minato's eyes grew stony. We're bringing Danzo in for questioning, immediately. And I want everyone prepared. We don't know what kind of vile tricks he still has up his sleeve. The moment he steps inside, seal his chakra completely. Make sure he can't move or use substitution. Most importantly, tie his hands. I don't want him forming a single hand seal. Tsunade's eyebrows went up, and after that, with the situation bearing down on him, Minato let out a slow exhale. Tsunade spoke again before he could reply, this time in a calmer tone. They'll want to know how you found out, she continued. You should tell them what Naruto is building out there. Minato gave a serious nod. Tsunade went on, I'll explain everything to the council. Maybe, just maybe, they'll finally learn something from him. Minato nodded slowly, his eyes growing aloof. Let's hope so, before it's too late. Chambers of the council, in their assigned seats, the village clan elders were all waiting. While some, like Hiyashi Hyuga and Fugaku Uchiha, sat in silence and watched the room, others were quietly talking to each other. The silence was broken by Kaharu. Does anyone know why this emergency meeting was called? We're wondering the same, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, said in a cool but inquisitive tone. The council room doors opened as whispers of conjecture sounded among the elders. The entrance of Minato Namikaze, accompanied by Jiraiya and, to everyone's surprise, Tsunade, caused everyone to turn. There were whispers. For as long as many of them could remember, Tsunade had not visited the village. Eyes sweeping the room, Minato strode steadily toward the Hokage's seat. He hesitated a moment as his eyes fell on one man, Danzo. Jiraiya positioned himself behind Minato, alert and tall. Meanwhile, Tsunade sat next to Kushina. Tsunade did not even nod in response to Kushina's slight, kind smile. The room became increasingly tense. With a tone tinged with impatience, Danzo broke the silence. Minato, can you tell us why we've been summoned so suddenly? Minato's response was incisive and uncompromising. That's Hokage-sama to you, Danzo. I believe you know that well. Danzo's head dropped instantly. Yes, Hokage-sama. Minato inhaled deeply, his face solemn. I know you're all wondering why this emergency meeting was called without notice. The reason is simple. I've uncovered a serious breach in village security, and several other disturbing matters that require immediate attention. Minato nodded subtly as he turned to face Jiraiya. With practiced hands, Jiraiya unrolled a large scroll and stepped forward to the center of the room. Its seal was activated by a chakra pulse, and a series of gory corpses emerged with a puff of smoke. The room reverberated with gasps. Even seasoned clan leaders who had fought innumerable conflicts recoiled at the sight. The bodies of 12 shinobi, cut precisely in half by a surgeon, were spread out in front of them. It seemed as though they had been dissected rather than killed because of how carefully and smoothly the cuts were made. What the hell is this? Homura cried out in a fit of fright. They look like Anbu, Fugaku muttered, his eyes narrowing. But not any Anbu I recognize. Although Danzo's face stayed expressionless, those who observed him intently could see the strain in his jaw. Hiruzen said, these are root operatives, in a heavy voice. A stunned silence descended upon the room. With icy eyes, Hiruzen turned to face him and said, Danzo, I ordered you to disband Root years ago. Yet here they are. You've continued it behind my back, haven't you? Danzo said calmly, I don't know what you're talking about. A few of the elders recoiled as Minato's palm cracked sharply as it slammed down on the desk. He said, don't lie to us, Danzo, in a stern voice. We've all known about your shadow operations for years. But now, people have died. So tell us, what happened here? Who killed them? Sume Inuzuka spoke in a low, straightforward voice as she leaned forward. Yeah, and why were they even out there? Who were they targeting? Minato made a snap decision. Naruto. The council was shocked by the name. Stunned, Inoichi exclaimed, Naruto. Why would Naruto kill them? Why would he even be a target? With her arms folded, Tsunade fixed Danzo with her gaze. Maybe the better question is, why wouldn't he? Anyone would strike back if their home was attacked. Don't forget, Naruto has his own village now. Shikaku Nara's thoughts were racing. So, you're saying root agents attacked the village Naruto founded, and he defended it? Is that it, Hokage-sama? Danzo squinted his eyes. I had nothing to do with this. Minato's scowl intensified. You expect us to believe root acts without your knowledge. They never moved without your direct orders. You sent them. You sent them to attack Naruto. Why? At last, Danzo removed the mask slightly. That boy, he's a shinobi of Konoha, like it or not. And now he's using techniques no one has ever seen before, abilities we can't identify, can't predict. We should bring him back. Make him loyal to this village. Demand he teach us those techniques. You all seem to have forgotten how Konoha treated him. What if he returns for revenge? The ensuing silence was dense. Everyone in the room listened uneasily to Danzo's words. For the first time, some people started to wonder why Naruto hadn't destroyed the village sooner rather than whether he had the ability to do so. Minato's voice sliced through the room like a blade before anyone could say anything. Do you know what acting behind the Hokage's back is called, Danzo? He asked, his eyes blazing. Treason. Danzo winced. He's had every reason to destroy Konoha, but he didn't, Minato added, raising his voice. And now, because of your greed, because of your obsession with control, you've given him the perfect justification to strike. This wasn't for the village. This was for your ego. Minato produced a folded letter from inside his cloak and held it aloft. This is a letter Naruto sent me. I received it a few minutes ago. Read it. He gave it to the Fugaku Uchiha, the closest clan head. Each face became more troubled as they read the contents of the scroll, which moved through the room in tense silence. Troublesome, Shikaku Nara rubbed his temples and muttered to himself. Now red with rage, Danzo leapt to his feet. So, that's it, you're going to surrender me. Hand me over to that boy just because he made a few threats. Are you willing to betray one of your own elders for the demands of a child? Minato didn't even give him a glance. Calmly, Sensei, he said. Jiraiya suddenly materialized behind Danzo and applied a seal of chakra suppression to his back. Danzo's chakra was sealed before he could respond, and Jiraiya pulled him violently to the middle of the room. Abruptly, root agents rushed to Danzo's aid, breaking through the shadows and windows. Tsunade was quicker, though. She incapacitated them all in a matter of seconds with a single, ground-shaking punch and a chakra pulse, leaving their bodies dispersed, unconscious, or restrained. Then, silently, Jiraiya removed the cloak from Danzo's right arm and started removing the various bandages. Everyone in the room recoiled at what they saw. Danzo's right arm pulsed strangely, a hideous combination of flesh and wood, resembling a tree limb infused with chakra. However, the arm itself contained the true horror. They were met with the gaze of a dozen Sharingan eyes. Gasps of disgust and incredulity sounded throughout the room. What the hell is that? Exclaimed Sume Inuzuka at the sound. White-faced, Homura muttered, his arm, it's like a damn experiment. Minato remained silent. He had a somber face. Fugaku Uchiha, however, was the most impacted. The sight of his clan's stolen legacy embedded in Danzo's arm made him stand slowly, his face a mask of betrayal and rage. Minato, Fugaku said in a low, menacing voice. What is this? That's a dozen Sharingan. Where did he get those eyes? Silently, that thought reverberated in each council member's head. Minato surveyed the space. This, he continued, is the truth I wanted you all to see. The room fell silent, even the sound of the wind whistle was silenced. Minato stated in a tone of cold, controlled rage, all this time, we've been harboring a traitor among us. A man willing to betray anyone, do anything, no matter how vile or heinous, to achieve his goals. He got out of his chair and put a large pile of documents on the table so the council could see them. These are the documents I reviewed a few minutes ago, he stated. They are undeniable proof of Danzo's treason, his secret dealings with Orochimaru, and their desecration of the first Hokage's grave. They harvested Hashirama Senju's cells and used them in twisted experiments, trying to recreate wood release. The council erupted in gasps and curses. Minato kept on speaking. Most of their experiments failed. Only 2 subjects survived. One is Danzo, the other, our Anbu agent who was kidnapped by Orochimaru as a child. Outrage erupted from the commotion in the room. Minato's voice roared, enough. Tension crackled in the air like lightning as the room fell silent. Minato said, I know you're all furious, in a heavier but more composed tone. But there's more. Danzo and Orochimaru's ambitions didn't stop with wood release. Their ultimate goal was to obtain the legendary dojutsu, the Rinnegan. Again, gasps spread, this time incredulously. The Rinnegan, scowled Hiyashi Hyuga, but isn't that just a myth? The legends say all dojutsu originated from it, but there are no real records of it ever existing. Slowly, Fugaku nodded. There's no mention of it in the Uchiha archives either. If it were real, we would have known. Jiraiya then moved forward. He had a serious expression. Silently, it's real, he said. I've seen it, so has Tsunade, and Orochimaru. A stunned silence descended upon the room. It's a purple eye, Jiraiya went on, with ripple-like patterns spreading across the eyeball. During the Second Shinobi War, we were in Omegakure. That's where we met 3 war orphans, one of them had the Rinnegan. He didn't understand it, didn't know how to use its power, but the eye was there. Undeniable. A beat went by. Kaharu insisted, then why didn't you bring him to Konoha? He could have been an asset to the village. Tsunade stood, her voice sharp, her chair scraping the floor. Shut up, you old hag. Jiraiya also didn't hold back. You think we should have dragged a war-torn child to Konoha like some weapon? Is that all you see people as, tools for your power games? Unlike you, we still have morals. That boy was a victim of war, not a prize. As the other members of the council watched, split between shock, embarrassment, and growing rage, Kaharu and Homura fell into stunned silence. There was a long, tense silence before Minato spoke once more. But, to our luck, he continued, Orochimaru failed. He never acquired the Rinnegan. He got nothing from that pursuit. The council let out a collective sigh of relief. The burden on their shoulders appeared to be lessened for a while. However, Minato's eyes changed, becoming piercing and unblinking as he looked at Fugaku Uchiha. The Sharingan was embedded in Danzo's arm. He harvested them, from your clansmen who lost their lives in the Third Shinobi War, from fallen Uchiha. He took their eyes and cultivated them for his own purposes. The room fell silent, sick with disgust. But why put them in his arm is still a mystery, Minato said, narrowing his eyes. Why not where the Sharingan works best, in his mind? What do you know, Fugaku? After a moment of silence, Fugaku spoke in a steady, dark voice. There's only one reason someone would do that, Izanagi. Confused, the council stirred. Izanagi, Sume inquired, what is that? Fugaku grimly explained, it's a forbidden Uchiha technique, a kinjutsu that has been practiced since the time of the Warring States. It gives the user the ability to change reality, even death itself. However, there is a cost. Every use renders the performer permanently blind. He squinted at Danzo's lifeless body on the ground. He would have inserted more than one Sharingan into his arm in order to spam Izanagi. Make him functionally immortal by giving up one eye at a time. That's the reason he did it. Like a stone, the council felt the weight of that truth. The village had not just been betrayed by Danzo. He had attempted to become divine. Jiraiya swung his blade without hesitation, severing Danzo's right arm, from which the embedded Sharingan eyes stared lifelessly as it hit the floor with a sickening thud. Minato stated, and there's one last thing, in a calm, icy tone. Fear and uneasiness pervaded the room as it tensed. Danzo, Minato added, you and Orochimaru plotted together during the invasion of Konoha. You aided him in the hopes that he would murder Lord Third and me so you could become the Hokage. The council erupted in surprise and indignation. You're a jerk. You dare. Sume Inuzuka roared, launching herself forward and punching Danzo in the face. Enough, Minato ordered, his voice piercing the confusion. Eyes blazing, he took a step toward Danzo and said, tell us the truth. You did all of this for what reason? Furthermore, don't use Konoha's good as an excuse anymore. Your actions have only harmed this village, never protected it. You're all weak, he spat, raising his head with a contemptuous expression. You call yourselves leaders, but you hide behind peace, a peace that only prompts enemies to attack. The world should be ruled by Konoha if we really wanted peace. The other villages ought to bow down to us. A shiver of disgust ran through the council, and his words were met with a heavier silence than before. There's still one thing that's bothering us, Shikaku sighed, breaking the tense silence. Knowingly, Minato nodded. You mean, how did we find out about all of this? The council members silently agreed with one another. It was Naruto, Jiraiya declared as she moved forward, who discovered everything. Every little thing. As Jiraiya's words sank in, a murmur went around the room, and the name Naruto now carried not only strength but a truth that rocked the council's foundations. However, where did he obtain all of this knowledge? With furrowed brows, Inoichi inquired, and when did you meet him exactly? After Naruto killed Orochimaru, he and his team personally raided all of his hidden bases, Jiraiya said, folding his arms. Every laboratory, each and every safe house. He combed through all of the records, journals, documents, and scrolls that Orochimaru had left behind. Everything. The weight of that statement struck hard, and the room fell silent. Kaharu said, so that means, he must have discovered jutsu scrolls and, more significantly, the notes from Orochimaru's experiments. They're where? Have you taken them away? Return them. He burned them all, Jiraiya declared bluntly. What, does he not realize how valuable those notes are? Kaharu yelled in shock. With his eyes glaring at her, Jiraiya said in a tone devoid of humor, do you really think that Orochimaru's sick, perverse experiments can yield anything of value? You're no better than him if you believe that, Kaharu. Kaharu stood motionless, and there was no sound in the room. Tsunade moved forward to ease the tension, saying, and before you asked, yes. We got to know him. We went to see the village he is constructing. Everyone was watching that. Kushina raised her head for the first time since the start of the meeting, a glimmer of light, a shaky hope, in her eyes as she inquired, how is it? Curious, Inoichi leaned forward a bit and said, yeah, what's it like? Tsunade looked from the council to Jiraiya and back again. She remarked, it's unlike anything we've ever seen, describing a village founded on survival and trust rather than ancestry or nobility. It serves as a home for outcasts, orphans, and people who have been betrayed by their own villages or abandoned by their families. The people there don't care about noble titles, rank, or bloodline prestige, she said, taking a deep breath before continuing. The title of legendary Sannin means nothing to them, they told us directly, looking us in the eyes. Your name doesn't earn you respect in that village. You have earned it by your deeds. They call him Naruto-sama, Jiraiya continued, but not because he claimed leadership or made demands for it. He never gave orders to be served. He works with them, eats with them, and lives with them. And he has earned that respect for everything he has done for every child and every family. The houses, Tsunade continued, are sturdy and clean despite their simplicity. Naruto's own house is also small. If we are all equal, then I have no reason to live in luxury while others do not, he said in response to our question about why. There was a profound silence that was one of revelation rather than tension. All of the clan heads and elders were astonished for the first time, not out of fear of the boy but out of admiration. Shikaku rubbed his chin thoughtfully and whispered, a 13-year-old, with this much wisdom, humility, and leadership. You can't instruct people in that. Hiashi Hyuga appeared impressed as well. With a tear streaming down her cheek, this time from pride rather than grief, Kushina closed her eyes. It seems, Hiruzen said quietly, breaking the silence, that Naruto and the first Hokage shared a vision. He is constructing his village on the same tenet that once governed ours, that all people can coexist peacefully, irrespective of their origins or history. A number of council members gave slow nods, clearly considering what had been said. Inoichi, however, scowled and leaned forward. All of that is praiseworthy, but it takes a lot of work to build a village, especially one that size. Where is he getting the funding for the housing, supplies, and infrastructure? It was a good point, and the other members of the council muttered that they agreed. With a slight smirk, Jiraiya seemed to anticipate the question. Do any of you know what Ryoman Industries is? He inquired. You mean the new corporation that started a few months ago? Hiashi asked, squinting. It has been expanding quickly, and some claim that in some industries it is already competing with our own trade. Jiraiya nodded. Exactly, Naruto owns it. The room was rocked by that statement. What? Tsume blinked. He's the owner of that business. However, how? Sincerely perplexed, Inoichi inquired, it should take years to build a business empire like that. He is 13 years old. Jiraiya's smile turned into a serious look. Because it's a reformed company, not a new one, he explained. It's true that Ryoman Industries was once Gato Industries, the same crooked conglomerate that engaged in black market trade, extortion, and smuggling. The realization caused the room to stiffen. Jiraiya went on to say, Naruto tracked down Gato's entire network after he left Konoha, halted the trafficking, dismantled the illicit activities, and confiscated all the assets. He then utilized the money to create something new rather than hoarding it. Something hygienic. He turned Gato's corruption into a foundation for something just, Tsunade said. And now, that company is funding his village, legally and efficiently. To take over a corrupt empire, purge it, and rebuild it in a matter of months, Hiyashi said, leaning back in astonishment. That requires discipline above all else, along with vision and strength. Once more, a thoughtful silence descended upon the room. They were talking about more than just Naruto as a promising young man this time. They were starting to realize. He had leadership skills already. It seems he planned this for months, maybe even years, Shikaku quietly said. This level of foresight and execution doesn't happen overnight. The others agreed with a nod. Tsunade whispered, I've heard he's a prodigy among prodigies, adding that some people believe his brilliance even outstrips that of Itachi Uchiha. He was never given the opportunity to demonstrate it in this village, but based on his independent achievements, it is evidently true. Kushina and Minato only felt remorse. They were all lost in thought when Danzo burst out laughing ominously. That boy is as naive as you are, he said icily, meaning that he believes that peace endures. However, peace is a delusion, a fictitious feeling of safety. Peace is not tolerated in the shinobi world. He may be stronger now, but strength only attracts more adversaries. Until they destroy him or he destroys himself, enemies will keep coming. And what if he is betrayed by the very people he defends? That boy is an idiot. Enough. Danzo, for your crimes against Konoha, waging an unnecessary war against other villages, illegally stealing bloodlines, desecrating the first Hokage's grave, attempting a coup, creating your own private military force, trafficking children, aiding an S-rank criminal, and conspiring with him. For all these crimes, you are hereby sentenced to execution, Minato yelled as he stepped forward, his voice resonating throughout the chamber. Do you think killing me will make Konoha safe? Danzo asked, his eyes blazing with rage. I've shielded this village from the darkness for years, he roared. I got rid of dangers before they ever got to your door. I did everything I could to elevate Konoha to the top. The voice said, wait, Inoichi. Inoichi, what is it? Minato turned to him and asked. We must first ask him for information regarding his root bases and the other members. We have no idea where they are. When they learn that their master has passed away, what if they launch an attack on the village? As a clan head, he said in a low, ashamed voice. I'm embarrassed to say that Danzo used blackmail to force me to give root some of my clan's members. I initially resisted. The missions I was given, however, were either rigged or faked. I escaped multiple attempts at assassination. Finally, there was nothing I could do. My entire clan would have suffered if I hadn't complied. He did the same with me, Shibi Aburame said as she moved silently forward. Inoichi was right. Even though Danzo deserved to be put to death, they couldn't afford to leave the village vulnerable just yet. Minato clenched his fists, his anger erupting at the revelations, but he forced himself to remain composed. All right, Inoichi, can you read his mind so we can locate the root bases and find out how many members he has? Minato inquired. All right, Inoichi, can you read his thoughts so we can find the root bases and determine his membership count? Minato inquired. Inoichi moved forward to try to get inside Danzo's head, but he was unsuccessful. No use, Inoichi scowled and said. What are you saying? Jiraiya inquired. I can't get into his head for some reason. Inoichi said, he may be using some seals. Jiraiya said, let me have a look then, and started looking for seals on Danzo's body. Jiraiya carefully examined Danzo's chakra network for several minutes before dispelling a dozen seals layered on top of one another. All right, I've removed the seals I found, he replied. Inoichi then made another attempt, narrowing his eyes as he concentrated, then relaxed, saying, okay, I have the information, Hokage-sama. Anbu, he called, and Minato nodded. Before him, 4 masked Anbu agents landed on their knees. Do what Inoichi says. The Anbu gave a silent nod. Additionally, there's something else, Hokage-sama. Something significant, Inoichi remarked. He continued after Minato gave him a look but remained silent. Children from the Uchiha, Hyuga, Akamichi, and Nara clans whose parents were killed were abducted by this jerk, in addition to several civilian orphans. The clan leaders of Nara, Hyuga, Akamichi, and Uchiha erupted at the sound of this. They all appeared to want to murder Danzo. Hokage-sama, said Fugaku in a cool but sharp voice, may I make a suggestion, if you don't mind? Minato gave a nod. A simple execution is insufficient for what he did, even though it may sound harsh. My oldest child's Mangekyo Sharingan contains a unique genjutsu called Tsukuyomi. Itachi manages time inside of it. An hour outside can occur during a day. What if we subjected Danzo to it? Fugaku proposed. It sounded brutal. Fugaku was suggesting more than a one-time execution for Danzo's crimes, and others gasped. I second it, replied Sume Inuzuka. As harsh as it sounds, kidnapping children for his own ends isn't something I can let slide. Minato gathered his thoughts and sighed. I've heard that overusing the Mangekyo Sharingan can blind its user. Hiruzen interrupted before he could say anything more. Are you certain about this? We should think about Itachi's welfare instead of letting our rage control us. Based on my observations, he is a pacifist who dislikes torturing his adversaries. In addition to the danger to his ninja career, asking him to do this could hurt him. As he finished speaking, the others in the room fell silent, realizing that they could not jeopardize the future of another ninja for the sake of retaliation. Fugaku gave a sympathetic nod. All right, Minato said, but we have to tend to root first. Everyone gave a nod of agreement. Minato, anything else? Hiruzen inquired. Minato gave a slow nod. One last thing, even though it's not a direct threat, it still poses a risk to all other countries in addition to us. Everyone took notice of that. A threat to the whole shinobi world was no laughing matter. Jiraiya-sensei told me about the Akatsuki, a gang of S-class criminals, a month ago. 9 shadowy figures stood in a perfect circle in front of a huge, demonic statue in an unidentified location, deep within a secret cave. The only parts of their bodies that were visible were their eyes, which glowed dimly in the low light as their bodies shimmered like black, oily mist. The one tail and the 3 tail are gone, declared Pain, the leader, in a composed yet authoritative tone. Beneath his mask, Toba's one bright right eye shone. Yes, according to Zetsu's report, the former son of the 4th Hokage, Naruto, defeated them. Killed both with a single strike. Deidara folded his arms and snorted. You expect us to believe that? It's up to you whether you believe it or not, Toby said nonchalantly. But there's more. He's built his own village, calls it Ryomen. A refuge for outcasts, orphans, and those betrayed by their villages. In just 3 months, he trained 6 genin to Chunin level strength. The group became uneasy after learning the truth. In the flickering torchlight, Sasori, Deidara, Kakuzu, and Kisame looked at each other in surprise. Pain's gaze grew strained. You said, former son. Give us complete information. His history, why he left the village, everything. With a sigh, Toba's voice became lighthearted. Using his trademark silly voice, he remarked, you know well that talking for a long time makes me tired. Toby started. Fine, listen, his tone changing from lighthearted to grave. He paused to allow the name to register. It's a long story. Naruto Uzumaki, the youngest son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. From what Zetsu gathered, he's a prodigy among prodigies. Some even claim his genius surpasses that of Itachi Uchiha. Everyone's attention was immediately drawn to that statement. Everybody looked at Toby. But, he went on, for reasons no one truly understands, his own family cast him aside. His father treated him like trash, his mother ignored him, and his elder siblings despised him. The most absurd part, Toby laughed softly, the entire village believed Hua's 9 tails reincarnated. Sometimes, they even beat him in the streets, and Minato did nothing to stop it. The irony of Konoha's great hero ignoring his own blood made several of the shadowed figures snort. Toby said, now, about the other 2, in a dismissive tone. Menma, the Jinchuriki, is pathetic. A useless brat. Of all the Jinchuriki, he's the easiest target. Honestly, he shouldn't have graduated from the academy at all, but Minato pulled some strings. His sister, the second Jinchuriki, might be a little trouble. She's strong, but nowhere near her brother Naruto's level. Compared to her, Menma's just dead weight. When they graduated, Naruto was assigned to a mission in the Land of Waves, Toby went on. During that mission, he killed the demon brothers. Kisami's shark-like smile widened as he scoffed. They were a disgrace to the title, demon. Indeed, replied Toby. On that same mission, Naruto encountered Zabuza and his apprentice. After completing the assignment, he officially resigned from Konoha and began his own path. Not long after, he sought out Zabuza and his apprentice, a survivor of the Yuki clan. Now, both serve under him. Kisame grinned more broadly. Zabuza working for him, huh, interesting. And a Yuki clan member too, this keeps getting better. After that, Toby said, Naruto went to the Mist Village and struck a deal with Meiterumi, the leader of the rebels. In exchange for Zabuza's freedom, he promised to end the civil war within an hour. And he did. He used a technique, probably wind-based, that no one had ever seen before. With surgical precision, he cleaved Yugura in half, ending the war and erasing the three tails in the process. The weight of his words hung in the air, and the cave fell silent. According to Toby, once the conflict ended, Naruto chose a place of his own, she said quietly. He named it Ryomen, and there, he began to build his own village. The group fell silent as Toba's words were heard. They had never heard of anyone using a single blow to defeat a Jinchuriki, much less one that could control their tailed beast. They were both uneasy about the revelation and wondered in silence what kind of jutsu Naruto had employed to pull off the feat. Toby went on in a steady voice. During Orochimaru's invasion of Konoha, Naruto stepped in once more. He killed Gaara, the Jinchuriki of the One Tail, along with his siblings. Later, when Hiruzen attempted the Reaper Death Seal to stop Orochimaru and the reanimated first and second Hokage, Naruto intervened again. He killed Orochimaru himself, using the same technique he used on Yugura, though slightly modified. This time, he didn't just cut him down, he diced him into countless small cubes. Deidara grinned and laughed softly. Hey, so the snake turned into snake meat for a barbecue. And later, Toby continued, Naruto hunted down every one of Orochimaru's hidden bases, and destroyed them all. With a slight tilt of her head, Konan broke the silence with a calm voice. And through all of that, he never took revenge on Konoha. After everything they did to him. Toby shrugged, reverting to his typical silly tone. Yup, no idea why, maybe he's just saving it for later. Konan's gaze grew strained. What about the latest news? Oh, that. Toby gave a small laugh. Danzo sent his root agents to attack Ryomen. Konan folded her arms. I assume that didn't end well. Yup, Toby said with a smile. Not only did it fail, but Naruto also sent a message back, a little reminder, to Minato to keep his dogs on a leash. He laughed under his mask. And that, my friends, is his story, so far. As Toba's story weighed heavily, a thick silence descended upon the room. There was much to process. It was Konan who spoke first. From what you said, he kills without mercy, and yet he built a village for outcasts and orphans. That's completely contradictory. And why didn't he kill Zabuza and his apprentice during that mission if they were enemies? Toby said, I've been wondering the same thing, his customary humor waning. Kisame raised his voice in an inquisitive tone. So, he probably knows about us, then. Of course, said Toby. Since Orochimaru was a former member, he must have left records about Akatsuki. Naruto likely knows everything we stand for. Kisame smiled. Then maybe we should invite him to join us. The voice of pain pierced the atmosphere. No. Several were taken aback by the abrupt firmness in his tone. Kisame, Kakuzu, and Deidara all turned to face him in surprise. Any reason? Asked Kakuzu bluntly. Pain's eyes were dimly glowing. He's interfered with our plans twice, whether by choice or coincidence, we don't know. But because of him, we've been set back to the beginning. It could take years for the tailed beasts to reform. We cannot risk bringing someone into our ranks who might disrupt us again. Konan's arms were folded. Do you think he'll try to stop us? Pain's face was still unreadable. He can try if he wishes, but he cannot defeat a god. For now, our focus remains the same. We gather funds, prepare ourselves, and hunt down the remaining Biju. Whether the one-tail and three-tail reform or not, we will still achieve our goal. Once again, the 9 members of the circle stood silently, each silently assessing the threat posed by the boy who dared to defy fate itself as long shadows were cast behind them by the eerie glow of the demonic statue. And then they were all gone. At an unidentified place. On the left, a man wearing an orange mask with a single eye was now angry. No, he was enraged. Damn you, Naruto. You delayed my plans. Years of planning went wrong. I should have killed you the night you were born. Toby yelled. It seems your sensei went senile for reasons unknown. He unintentionally caused us trouble twice. First 13 years ago when he attacked and made you run like a coward, and now he's produced a prodigy, said White Zetsu out of the corner. Shut up, Zetsu. Damn you, Minato. I knew you were a failure when you failed to protect Rin all those years ago, and now you've proven it again and again, said Toby. Well, your petty retaliation cost us the 3 tails, Black Zetsu remarked. Toby, whose real name was Obito Uchiha, asked, "What are you talking about? Aren't you the one who put Yagura under a genjutsu so he initiated the bloodline purge in the mist? And now, because of that, mist rebels have formed, and in an unexpected turn, Naruto killed Yagura." "We lost the three tails," replied Black Zetsu. "Shut up. Those bastards deserved it for what they did to Rin. Yes, we didn't expect this to happen. I wanted to kill Yagura after he eliminated everyone in the mist," replied Obito. "But don't worry. Did you forget that after Rin died, it took half a decade for the three tails to reform?" replied White Zetsu. "Yes, I remember. But that was a partial sealing, and in Yagura's case, he was a complete Jinchuriki. We haven't seen this before. It might take a decade for the three tails and half a decade for the one tail. We don't know if that's true or just our naive hope," replied Obito. Chambers of the Konoha Council. In a firm tone, Minato addressed the assembled clan leaders. "So that's it. Inform your clan members, if they ever encounter any of them, they are to retreat immediately. Do not engage. Their attire is distinctive. Black cloaks with red clouds on the back." The elders and clan leaders nodded and got up to go. Only Minato, Kushina, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Hiruzen were left in the room as the doors closed behind them. Hiruzen said, "It's good to have you back, Tsunade," with a soft smile. Tsunade gave him a stern look while crossing her arms. "Don't get the wrong idea, old man. I'm not here to stay. I came because that bastard desecrated my grandfather's legacy, and I won't leave until he pays for it." Hiruzen gave a small smile. Funny, coming from the same person who once said she'd never set foot in this village again, no matter what happened to it. Tsunade sighed in frustration. Her eyes briefly strayed to Kushina, conveying the obvious but unspoken message, "Will you just stop it, sensei? I have more important matters to discuss, but not here." Everyone in the room felt the weight of tension as the atmosphere grew heavy. They walked silently out of the council chamber and into Minato's office. Shizune silently trailed behind, holding Tun-Tun close to her. Kushina shook his hands. She already knew what this was about, and her heart ached with fear. Abruptly, the office was filled with the piercing sound of two slaps. With both of her cheeks now burning red and the imprint of Tsunade's hand clearly visible, Kushina's head jerked to the side. Tsunade yelled, her voice trembling with rage, "What the hell were you thinking, Kushina? Do you have any idea what you've done? You ignored your own son, made him feel unwanted. What in the world got into you? I never remember you being like this, and yet, you did it to your own child." Silently, Kushina lowered her head. "Speak," demanded Tsunade. The words, I thought Naruto was strong," came out of Kushina's mouth in a stutter. "Independent. I believed he could manage on his own, so I thought it was better if I gave all my attention to Menma and Mito." Slap. Tsunade's eyes were burning. "Do you even hear yourself, Kushina? Just because someone's strong doesn't mean they don't need love. He's your child. You, of all people, should understand loneliness. You suffered it after your grandmother died. And yet you made your own son feel the same pain." Kushina lost his cool. She fell to her knees, tears running down her cheeks. "I know, I realized it, but it's too late. Naruto's gone. He'll never forgive us. I failed the one thing I dreamed of being. I failed as a mother. I'm a disgrace to the Uzumaki name." As the others stood in solemn silence, each burdened by the regret that arrived too late, her sobs filled the room, raw and hollow. Kushina's voice trembled as she spoke, wiping the tears from her swollen eyes slowly. Her voice cracked with desperation. "Tsunade, please, just tell me. How is he? Is he okay? It's been months since I last saw him. Please, Tsunade, I'm begging you." With a long, heavy sigh, Tsunade's anger turned to sympathy. "He's fine, Kushina," she muttered. "He's doing well. Happy. In that village he built, he finally found peace far away from you in this village." The bittersweet relief that her son was alive and happy, just not with her, caused Kushina's breath to catch and her eyes to well up once more, but this time it was not from guilt or rage. Tsunade inquired, "Where are Menma and Mito?" "At home," said Kushina. Tsunade swiveled to face Hiruzen. "You old man, what were you doing while Naruto was being treated like that in his own village? Were you too busy indulging in the smut this idiot writes to notice? You didn't help him, not once. And now look at the result, he's gone. Be grateful he didn't destroy the village when he had the chance," she said in a voice filled with rage. In embarrassment, Hiruzen bowed his head. "I failed to notice his sadness and pain whenever he came to visit me, whether it was to clarify something about a jutsu or simply to talk. He always acted as if nothing was wrong. Sometimes, though, I could see the hurt in his eyes. When I asked, he would just say it was nothing, that everything was fine. I never imagined Minato would act this way. I remember how happy he was the night those three were born. I don't know what changed or what happened that made him treat Naruto like that. The only reason Naruto didn't destroy the village was because he saw it as a waste of his time, a rotten shell hiding behind a glorious mask for the outside world. But he saw straight through that mask. So that's how low you've all sunk. Seeing how the son of a cage was treated, it's not hard to believe, Tsunade grumbled bitterly. Now, Minato, I think there's another matter we need to discuss. Just because the one tail and two tails are gone doesn't mean the Akatsuki will stop. They'll come for the rest of the Biju. So, what will you do now? Jiraiya asked, closely observing Minato. I'll inform the other cages, Kumo, Iwa, Kiri and Takigakure. The seven tails is in Taki, so I'll reach out to them as well. Hopefully, they'll take action, Minato replied. Kumo, Kiri and Taki might listen, Jiraiya stated, but I doubt Iwa will. There are rumors, unconfirmed, but troubling, that Iwa is recruiting the Akatsuki to carry out high-level missions. And knowing Onoki, he still holds a grudge from the Third War. He might not cooperate. Minato exhaled slowly and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Regardless, as a cage, it's my duty to act. Whether the other villages take precautions or not is up to them. This threat isn't just to Konoha, it's to all of us. After a brief pause, Kushina said in a low voice, so, what do we do about Menma and Mito? Minato's face became stern. Mito will continue her training and will rotate various teams. As for Menma, I've stripped him of his genin rank. As of now, he's a civilian. Kushina's voice rose in shock as her eyes grew wide. She cried out, you did what? How could you do that, Minato? You saw what happened with Naruto. Are you really going to repeat that? Why would you do this to him? Minato did not recoil. He spoke in a firm but calm tone. Kushina, calm down and listen to me. Please. Once you hear everything, you'll understand, and maybe even agree with me. He went to his desk and took out a sealed scroll from a drawer. His face was solemn as he gave it to her. This is Jiraiya-sensei's report from the month he trained Menma for the Chunin exams. Kushina picked up the scroll and saw Jiraiya's handwriting right away. Her grip tightened with each word as she read it line by line. When she was done, she looked up, unsure. So, for this you stripped him of his rank. We should have trained him better. We failed him, Minato. Minato said, you're not wrong, in a heavy voice. But Kushina, you're thinking like a mother right now. I need you to think like a Hokage. He exhaled. You read the same report I did. He knows the shadow clone technique, but hasn't improved. I taught Menma and Mito the Rasengan months ago. Mito can form it, he still can't. His voice was frustrated as he let out a sigh. The report says it clearly, he's lazy. He doesn't take training seriously. Not missions, not even himself. Eyes steady, he took a step closer. If I let him continue like this, he'll become a burden to his team, or worse, he'll die on a mission. I've already done enough damage by pampering him during his childhood. He couldn't even touch me in a sparring match where I fought at an academy student's level. So tell me, he added in a tone that was both painful and determined, should I act like a Hokage and as a real father, by making the difficult decision that might keep him alive, or should I give in to my feelings as a father and let him keep the rank? Kushina remained quiet for a while. She then nodded slowly. You're right, I hate it, but you're right. Does he know? Minato gave a nod. I gave him 1 month to prove himself. If I see even the slightest improvement, I'll let him retake the exam. But make no mistake, we're both at fault here. Especially me. Shameful, he turned away. I abused my position as Hokage to push him through the academy. The truth is, he should never have passed. Eyes weary, he turned back to her. If you still have doubts, test him yourself when we get home. In the home of Namikaze, Minato, Kushina, Jiraiya, Shizune, and Tsunade entered the Namikaze residence. Minato yelled as soon as they were inside. Menma, Mito, come here. Both kids showed up a short while later. Mito's cheeks were stained with transparent tear stains, and her eyes were puffy and red. Conversely, Menma rushed in, his eyes blazing with rage. Tsunade, who had never met Minato's children before, observed the two in silence and studied them. Menma's anger erupted the instant he saw Jiraiya. He yelled, Why did you do that to me? And then rushed in his direction. Menma, that's enough. Minato gave a firm command. Menma, however, paid no attention. He struck Jiraiya with a fist, but he sidestepped it with ease, avoiding the blow with composure and elegance while maintaining an unreadable expression. As Menma continued to lunge and miss, the scene nearly became comical, akin to a monkey thrashing at a mountain. Chakra chains flew across the room, encircling Menma's body and lifting him off the ground before Minato could intervene. He turned to face his mother and froze, his eyes wide. Kushina stood quietly as her chakra rose and her hair started to lift a little. She appeared enraged and more menacing than he had ever seen her. She remarked icily, "It seems Jiraiya went easy on you." The chains disappeared, and Menma fell heavily to the ground. He showed mercy. Honestly, even a civilian could fight better than what you just showed. Too shocked, too embarrassed, he remained motionless. Menma yelled, his voice trembling with rage, "Why are you doing this to me? First Jiraiya, then Dad, and now you. Why is everyone acting like this? Are you really asking that, brat? After making a fool of yourself?" Tsunade quipped. Menma shouted back, "Who are you supposed to be, you old hag?" Without hesitation, Jiraiya stepped aside to avoid what he knew was coming. He shuddered under Tsunade's lethal gaze as she turned her glare on him. I think if you pummel him now, he'll die," Jiraiya uttered uneasily. Tsunade let out a sigh. "You're probably right." Her gaze returned to the two siblings. "Hey, you two brats, I'll ask you one question. Answer me truthfully, or else you can ask your father what my punches feel like." Mito and Menma both froze in disbelief. Menma yelled, "You dare threaten our father, the Hokage?" As Tsunade said icily, "Be glad I didn't kill him for what he did." Menma raged, "And who even are you? You truly are pitiful," Tsunade remarked scathingly. "Even a civilian could tell who I am." Mito interrupted, scowling at her brother. "Idiot," she said, "that's Tsunade Senju, one of the legendary Sannin, granddaughter of the first Hokage, and grandniece of the second." With anger in his eyes, Menma yelled, "So what? Just because you're a Sannin and related to the first and second Hokage doesn't mean you can just beat up the Hokage and threaten him. So what?" With a deep exhale, Tsunade's voice began to sound irritated. "Kushina, please, educate this brat before I lose my temper." Kushina intervened and said sharply, "Menma, Mito, pay close attention. Tsunade is my cousin and your unofficial godmother." "What?" Menma and Mito exclaimed together, their voices full of incredulity. Tsunade snapped, "Enough of this nonsense," in response. "Now answer my question. Tell me, what made you two treat Naruto the way you did? Why did you hate him? Has he ever done anything to deserve that from either of you?" Her gaze widened as it focused on Menma. "And you, brat, just because you can't achieve anything quickly doesn't give you the right to play the victim and make Naruto look bad in your father's eyes." Menma tensed but remained silent, her gaze fixed on the ground. Tsunade looked over at Mito. "And you, girl, you carry the name of your great-great-grandmother, yet you've acted nothing like her. So tell me, why did you hate him?" Mito whispered, I didn't hate him," as tears welled up in her eyes. Her voice cracked with remorse as she said, "But I never showed him the love I should have. I stayed silent when Mom ignored him, when Dad hated him. I didn't stand up for him when he was alone. I was a terrible sister to him. I just wish I could see him again, to tell him I'm sorry. If only I had spoken up back then, maybe none of this would have happened." Tsunade's face grew softer. Silently, "I believe you," she said. Menma and Mito both looked up in surprise. They all said, "What do you mean?" together. The gentle reply from Tsunade was, "It's what Naruto said to me, that you live in the shadows of your perfect world, a world built around Menma." Mito gasped for air. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she pleaded, You met him. Please, tell me where he is. I need to see him, to make things right." With a sharp and unyielding tone, Tsunade demanded, "What about you, brat?" She gave her answer. "Now it's your turn. Why are you all supporting him?" Menma yelled, her voice full of confusion and rage. His eyes blazed as he turned to face Kushina and Minato. "All these years, you ignored him. And now that he's gone, you're suddenly showing him the love you never gave before. What changed? Is it because he's powerful now?" With guilt weighing heavily on their faces, Minato and Kushina bowed their heads, unable to look him in the eye. Although Menma's voice wavered, his words were profound. I don't have any reason for what I did it because it was funny. The room became quiet. The air was filled with the faint chirping of cicadas outside. Kushina's breathing became labored. Minato's eyes grew regretful. Tsunade's fist clenched, and she was on the verge of punching Menma unconscious. Mito was stunned and stood motionless. Jiraiya gazed in horror at the tragic state of his beloved student's family. Taunton narrowed its eyes, feeling the tension in the air, and Shizune gasped, covering her mouth with a trembling hand. And he went on, his voice breaking with a bitterness and a strange feeling. Every time Dad slapped him, no one cared. If I cried and pointed at Naruto, Dad would hit him, no questions asked. Mom never stopped it, and Mito just stayed silent, even when she saw it. The truth sank into the air like a shadow as his confession struck Minato, Kushina, and Mito like a physical blow. Nobody said anything. The stillness was oppressive. At last, Menma murmured, almost defensively, and I still think he used some secret scrolls to train. Tell me, how else could he have killed Orochimaru? What was that technique he used that day? No one knows. He must have found something forbidden. That's the only explanation. Mito gave an eye roll. Mumbling, again with the scrolls, she said. Jiraiya leaned forward, his voice impatient and amused. He smiled and paused before asking, Brat, do you even know a person can invent their own jutsu? Oh, wait, maybe you don't, because your dad pampered you like a glass doll. He became serious instead of playful. The Rasengan is your father's creation. The technique Naruto used against Orochimaru could very well be one of his own. People make jutsu all the time. They don't need secret scrolls for everything. With a warning in his eyes, he tapped the floor with the tip of his shoe. And if I hear you bring up secret scrolls one more time, I swear I don't know what I'll do. Tsunade's mouth quirked into a menacing grin. The room held its breath. When the seasoned shinobi closed in with their combined, unmistakable presence, Menma's confidence wavered. You know, Tsunade said with an icy face, folding her, never in my life have I seen a spoiled brat like you, nor did I ever imagine one could exist. What happened to you, Minato, Kushina? How could you raise him to be like this? Kushina and Minato lowered their heads in embarrassment. Mito said softly, her voice trembling from tears, do you think Naruto would accept my apology? Tsunade let out a sigh. I don't know, Mito. I truly don't. With a serious expression, Jiraiya said, Haim, I think they should know what's happening. You're right, Tsunade said after a moment's hesitation. Then, after a few minutes of explanation, the room was quiet again. With wide eyes, Mito questioned, so you're saying they might attack at any moment? And if the Nine Tails is extracted from us, we'll die. Tsunade gave a solemn nod. Mito whispered, if that's the case, Mom, how did you survive the extraction process? Kushina inhaled deeply. After sealing the Nine Tails in both of you, your dad gathered the traces of its chakra lingering in the air and sealed them within me. That's the only reason I lasted as long as I did. My Uzumaki heritage kept me alive for a few hours, otherwise, I would have died immediately. Mito looked at her mother while wiping away her tears. So, what will you do now? Will you train us to fight the Akatsuki? Notice, Jiraiya sternly corrected her. What do you mean by that? Won't you train Menma too? Replied Mito. It's up to your father, Jiraiya said so grudgingly. We can't train civilians. Dad, Mito said, turning to Minato in disbelief, you took away Menma's genin rank. Yes, Minato replied in a serious tone. The reason is simple, he can't defend himself. You saw for yourself a few minutes ago how much he struggled. The Ryomen, Haku and Zabuza were seated across from Naruto, who was seated at the big oak table with documents and maps arranged in front of him. The room was filled with a warm, golden glow as sunlight poured through the large windows. The spread of maps and notes was illuminated by the soft reflection of light from the table's polished surface. With a steady but inquisitive tone, Zabuza questioned, can you tell us why you don't want to form alliances with the bigger villages? Simple, said Naruto, staring at the map. They will impose conditions that are designed to benefit them rather than us. Furthermore, we have no way of knowing when these countries will turn on one another. We would be drawn into their conflicts if we were allies, and I absolutely detest that. That may be true, but we also lack military strength, Haku said, nodding in agreement. There can't be all the fighting between the three of us. We require a strong defense force, a stable infrastructure, and, above all, an economy that can support itself. Roiman Industries cannot sustain the village indefinitely. You make a fair point, Haku, Naruto said, looking up with a slight smile on his face. But who would trust a village that's only a few months old, even if we wanted to build alliances with the larger countries? Look at our options, he said, leaning forward and using his finger to trace lines on the map. Iowa wouldn't concur. They would turn down any offer before I even said anything because I look too much like Minato. Kumo isn't any better. The Hyuga heiress's father killed a Kumo ambassador who attempted to kidnap her when I was 3 years old. Minato refused to back down when the Third Raikage threatened to go to war. Deep tension has existed ever since, and we don't know the true nature of the Fourth, eh? It's better we don't even talk about Konoha, he said in a low, contemptuous voice. The worst kind of viper's nest is their council. He stopped and said, Kurigakure might be an option, but I suspect Mei would only agree if she got something in return, likely you, Zabuza. With a laugh, Zabuza grunted, HMPH. It wouldn't be the first time Mei attempted to negotiate on my behalf. How about Suna? Quietly, Haku inquired. Naruto stated bluntly, Suna won't even consider it, adding, they still despise me for killing the Kage's children. It is not possible to form an alliance with them. Silence fell over the room for a long time as the harsh realities set in. So, what are your thoughts? Zabuza broke the silence by asking. I suggest we start by forming alliances with smaller villages, said Naruto. It'll give us stability and mutual support without attracting unnecessary attention, and they won't try to control us like the major ones would. With caution, Haku questioned, wouldn't they ask for something in return? With a slight smile, Naruto replied, yes, but there is one nation that will sign a treaty with us without hesitation. Haku and Zabuza both took notice of that statement. Almost simultaneously, they asked, which country? The Land of Waves, was Naruto's assured response. Haku's head cocked. You mean the bridge builder's country? Naruto gave a nod. Ever since I saved them from Gato, they've been deeply grateful. I'm certain they'll agree to an alliance. In return, we can provide them with construction contracts for developing this village. It'll generate income for them and reinforce our own infrastructure. If needed, we can also offer ninja protection services in the future. Zabuza thought about it and crossed his arms. It's a sound plan, he acknowledged. But I still think we should consider forming alliances with actual shinobi villages too. Naruto said, I agree, and nodded slightly. And I already have one in mind. Haku and Zabuza looked at each other curiously. Together, they questioned, which one? Nadeshiko Village, Naruto replied in a composed yet methodical manner. Intrigued by the unexpected decision, Zabuza arched an eyebrow and Haku gave a slight smile. A little taken aback, Haku questioned, the village made up entirely of kunoichi. Why them? Do you really think they'd agree to an alliance with us? With composure and thoughtfulness, Naruto reclined in his chair. His response was, because they're like us, independent. Isolated. They've survived without relying on the great villages for years, just like we're trying to do now. Zabuza's arms were crossed. That doesn't mean they'll welcome outsiders. Especially not men. Naruto gave a nod. True, but Nadeshiko values strength, conviction, and mutual respect. If we approach them properly, offer fair terms and show them we're not just another power-hungry faction, they might be willing to listen. Haku's head cocked slightly. And what exactly do we offer them? Trust, was Naruto's firm response. We can build a bond through trade, knowledge exchange, and mutual support. Our village already has a growing number of kunoichi. We can ask Nadeshiko to help train them. In return, we can provide supplies, resources, and protection when needed. A partnership, not dependence. He glanced at both of them. So, what do you say? Haku scowled a little. It sounds promising, but from what I've heard, they don't exactly trust men. The three of us showing up might not go well. Naruto nodded slightly in agreement. That's exactly why we need to approach this carefully. We'll plan thoroughly, choose the right words, maybe even the right people to make the first contact. And in the meantime, we should keep exploring alliances with other smaller villages too. You're thinking like a cage, kid, Zabuza grinned. I think you should ask Lady Tsunade for help, Haku thoughtfully suggested. She saw for herself what's happening here, and I think you made a good impression on her. Naruto gave him a curious glance. Go on. She enjoys great respect in every country. There will be a significant difference if someone like her speaks up for us when we approach Nadeshiko. They might not respond with suspicion or animosity based solely on her reputation. You truly are a genius, Haku, Naruto said with a slight smile. Thank you, Naruto-san, Haku nodded modestly in response. Then, as he continued to think out loud, his tone changed. We should also begin growing rare medicinal herbs and exotic plants. It will assist us in creating our own trade goods, both for import and export. In this manner, we create an economy that is both self-sufficient and beneficial to others. Naruto gave a nod of agreement. You have a keen sense of this. I'm assigning you to lead that project because you already possess medical knowledge. Haku bowed his head slightly and smiled warmly. I'm grateful, Naruto-san. I will not disappoint you. Thank you for your trust. Any other business? Naruto inquired. We need our own spy network, declared Zabuza bluntly. At our current rate of growth, we'll be a name people notice in a few years, he said, leaning forward. That will draw adversaries. As demonstrated by the case of Uzushiogakure, even neutral settlements are targeted. People will believe that your method is becoming popular and that you have taught others how to use it. A spy network will let us spot threats early and stop small problems from turning into war, Zabuza said. I agree, but I'm not well versed in spying or infiltration, Naruto said, nodding slowly. You and Haku are not. A half-smile flickered across Zabuza's lips. What do you think, brat? I've never had the stage to demonstrate my mastery of that. Naruto's expression brightened. Really? Next, train some genin. Get a cell going. Teach them how to blend in, conduct reconnaissance, and gather information covertly. Zabuza bowed his head and said, consider it done, his voice hardening. And one more thing. Don't accept anyone just because they say they are orphans from now on. Who knows? To get information, some villages may send adults or children dressed as refugees. But we'll run chakra detection before they enter the village, right? Naruto asked with a contemplative nod. That ought to indicate whether they are shinobi. Don't count on it, Zabuza grunted. Before infiltrating, a skilled ninja can fully seal their chakra. Naruto sighed and gave in. All right, you're correct. A more comprehensive screening procedure will be required. If there's nothing else to discuss, we can end the meeting, Naruto replied. After giving a nod of agreement, Haku and Zabuza quietly departed the room, leaving Naruto to think alone.